Chapter 2302. After Yu Qian left the lightning pool, he went straight back to Feng Ming Mountain. Dumpling was nestled in Chu Liuyue's arms, and the two of them were whispering to each other. Sensing his movements, the two of them looked up at the same time. Dumpling immediately became alert. She jumped out of Chu Liuyue's arms and blocked in front of her. Yu Qian came in front of her and first scanned Dumpling from head to toe. After confirming that she was safe and sound, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. "Don't worry. I didn't plan to do anything to her today." Dumpling was skeptical. "Who knows how much of what you say is true and how much of it is false? And, you even locked up Grandpa Clan leader." Her little face was full of anger, as if she had not recovered from the shock caused by this matter. Yu Qian was not surprised by Dumpling's reaction. She was the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Seeing Yi Zhao in trouble, it was naturally difficult for her to accept. It's a long story. Yi Zhao made a mistake first. Locking him in the lightning pool was just to wake him up. Unfortunately, he was still stubborn and even did such a thing in the end. Yu Qian's usually gentle expression now had a hint of coldness added to it, causing people to shudder. "I'm sure you've seen what he's done." Yi Gong's body and soul were destroyed, and the entire lightning pool was almost destroyed by him. It can only be said that he reaped what he had sown. Dumpling bit her lips and clenched her two little fists tightly. Great Elder betrayed the clan first. Grandpa Clan leader wants to kill him, so it is reasonable. This is our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's matter. When is it up to you outsiders to judge? She glared at Yu Qian. "Release Grandpa Patriarch right now." Yu Qian was not angry. Instead, he laughed. "If you want to save him, it's very simple. In the future, as long as you stay here and cultivate properly, I guarantee that his life will not be in danger. When you open your 9th meridian, I will release him." Dumpling was shocked. Chu Liyue also frowned subconsciously. 9th meridian? In the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, only their ancestor, Yiling, had managed to do so. Yu Qian actually had such high expectations for Dumpling? Furthermore, what was his purpose for doing this? To be honest, even Yi Zhao might not urge Dumpling to open her meridians, nor would he place this heavy burden on her shoulders. However, Yu Qian, what was he so anxious about? How long do we have to wait? "I think you are just trying to fool me." Dumpling gritted her teeth. "How am I fooling you? Don't forget, you have the purest bloodline. Now that you have successfully opened your 7th meridian before reaching adulthood, you will definitely be able to open your 9th meridian in the future. There is no doubt about this. As for the time, that will depend on you." Yu Qian looked around. "There is no place more suitable for you to cultivate than Feng Ming Mountain. With your current aptitude, why do you have to worry about not being able to open your meridians?" Dumpling stared at him and did not say anything. She turned around and pounced on Chu Liyue, hugging her thigh tightly. "Ah, you, this person is so annoying." Chu Liyue picked her up and looked at Yu Qian with a frown. "Second Divine Envoy, since you have already made up your mind, I know that no one can persuade you. Since that is the case, I hope you can keep your promise. On the day that Dumpling opens her 9th meridian, you must release clan leader Yi Zhao." Yu Qian nodded. "Of course." As soon as he finished speaking, Nan Jinshu stood quietly and patiently waited for a response. After a while, a low voice finally came from inside. "Come in." Creak. The door opened. Nan Jinshu took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement surging from the bottom of his heart. He bowed respectfully before stepping forward. After he crossed the threshold, the door closed again. Nan Jinshu's figure disappeared behind the door. Jun Jiuqing, who was not far away, stared at the door thoughtfully for a long time. The 3rd zither score. No wonder he was so confident. He thought for a while and turned to leave. At this moment, Nan Jinshu walked into the courtyard. The courtyard was filled with a thick pile of fallen leaves. It was lonely, bleak, and extremely cold. If the sound did not come from here, Nan Jinshu would have suspected that there was no one here. The courtyard was not big, and the furnishings were very simple. It was hard to imagine that the Honorable First Divine Envoy lived in such a place. Nan Jinshu looked at the tightly shut door, and his heart started to beat faster. After all, he was going to meet the First Divine Envoy. It was impossible for him not to be nervous. He adjusted his collar and made sure that there was nothing wrong with his appearance before he continued walking. However, he had just taken a step when he heard a rustling sound from the side. He was stunned and turned around instinctively. Something seemed to be moving under the thick pile of fallen leaves not far away. Quiet. The low and indifferent voice sounded again. However, it was obviously directed at the existence under the fallen leaves. As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings fell silent again. Nan Jinshu was confused. What was that thing under there? I don't remember hearing about the first divine envoy keeping anything by his side. Nan Jinshu. Nan Jinshu's heart skipped a beat when he heard the first divine envoy call his name. Yes. Where is the third zither score now? The voice asked straightforwardly. Nan Jinshu was stunned for a moment. This first divine envoy. I think it's more convenient for me to talk inside, right? This matter was so confidential. It was weird to talk about it through the door. There's no one else here. Just say it. The voice was calm, but there was no room for refusal. Chapter 2303. After a moment of hesitation, Nan Jinshu cupped his fists and bowed. First divine envoy, as far as I know, the third piece of music score is still in the god-slaying mound. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire courtyard became even quieter. Nan Jinshu only felt an invisible pressure on his shoulders. It was unbearably heavy. He held his breath as nervousness gradually grew in his heart. The music score was split into 3 pieces and scattered all over the world of God. Only one piece was left in the god-slaying mound and was taken away by someone else. Now you're saying that the third piece is still in the god-slaying mound? There was a questioning tone in the deep voice. Nan Jinshu hurriedly said, First divine envoy, I wouldn't dare lie. The last piece is still in the god-slaying mound. Even that person doesn't know about it. I only learned about it recently when I learned that the heavenly gate had opened and Taizu's brocade pouch was opened. Before Taizu of the Nan family passed away, he left behind a brocade pouch for the family heads to keep. His last words were that it could only be opened when the heavenly gate of the illusory god palace opened. The family heads of the Nan family, including Nan Jinshu, didn't know about it before. Otherwise, Nan Yifan would have taken action long ago. If you know about it, then Jun Jiuqing should know about it too. Why didn't he report it? Nan Jinshu looked troubled. I don't know about that. How would he know what Jun Jiuqing was thinking? Maybe he was waiting for the right time. After all, only the family heads of the Nan family and family E knew about it. From a certain perspective, this was indeed an asset that could be used in negotiations. After a while the voice said, I already know about it. I already know about this matter. I will send people to search for him later. What do you want? Of course, he knew what Nan Jinshu was trying to achieve by coming here. Nan Jinshu's throat was dry from nervousness, but he was also excited and expectant. He paused for a moment, then said respectfully, First divine envoy, I would like to, please allow me to cultivate in the illusory god ocean. After the voice fell, the room fell silent. After a while the voice continued to ask, Are you sure? Yes. Nan Jinshu said carefully. Jinshu knows that her talent is insufficient. Based on her current standard, it is extremely difficult for her to ascend to the heavens and become a god. Therefore, he invited himself to enter the illusionary god ocean to cultivate and improve his cultivation base. This way, the Taizu name would not be tarnished in the future. A moment later, a stream of light flew out of the house. Nan Jinshu hurriedly caught it with both hands. It was a translucent talisman seal with the word illusion drawn on it. There were several mysterious patterns around it that were intertwined. This talisman can only be used once. When you come out of the illusionary god's sea, this talisman will automatically be destroyed and can only be used by one person. You may take it. Nan Jinshu was so excited that his hands were trembling slightly. He quickly thanked him. Thank you, First Oracle. You may leave. Yes. Nan Jinshu didn't dare to disturb him. He carefully put away the talisman and left respectfully. After he left, the inside and outside of the courtyard became quiet again. Nan Jinshu walked out happily with the seal in his hand. With this thing, he could enter the illusionary god's sea to cultivate. It wouldn't take long for his strength to skyrocket. At that thought, Nan Jinshu couldn't hide the joy in his eyes. Patriarch Nan? A young woman's gentle voice rang out. Nan Jinshu stopped in his tracks and turned to look. He saw a graceful figure walking toward him from the corner. She was gentle and beautiful, with long hair that reached her ankles. You are? Nan Jinshu was a little stunned. I'm Su Li. The woman in front of him smiled faintly. Nan Jinshu was stunned for a moment. Then, a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. Mr. Su. He had never seen Su Li before. The Nan family had suffered a great loss after the battle at Peach Blossom Dock. He had been recuperating in the Nan family. Although he had heard about Tang Ku and Mr. Su, Nan Jinshu had never had the chance to meet them. After coming to the illusionary god palace, he had vaguely heard that Su Li was here. However, it was only today that he saw her with his own eyes. Nan Jinshu paused for a moment and bowed. Oh, it's Mr. Su. My apologies. He had a special status in the illusionary god palace. His status was even higher than that of Chu Luiyue and the others. However, Su Li was an artifact sage. Naturally, she was different. Therefore, Nan Jinshu was rather polite to Su Li. Su Li glanced at him and asked with a smile, What are you talking about? Patriarch Nan, what good news did you have? Why are you so happy? Actually, she had just happened to pass by. She already knew that Nan Jinshu was in the illusionary god palace. She wanted to leave immediately, but Nan Jinshu's expression was a little strange. She looked up slightly and glanced behind Nan Jinshu. Patriarch Nan, did you come from the first divine envoy's side? Nan Jinshu didn't try to avoid the topic. He chuckled and nodded his head elegantly. That's right. I just met the first divine envoy. Su Li's beautiful eyes widened. She looked shocked. Really? Hasn't the first divine envoy been in seclusion for many years? She heard that the other divine envoys had tried to meet the first divine envoy several times, but they were all rejected at the door. But why did Nan Jinshu? Nan Jinshu was rather pleased with Su Li's reaction. Su Li, Mr. Su, was a powerful figure. He used to be high and mighty in the world of divine ruins. However, things were different now. So what if he was powerful? Su Li had to bow politely to the other divine envoys, but he could meet the first divine envoy directly. There was a huge difference between them. The feeling of being superior made Nan Jinshu very happy. Mr. Su, the first divine envoy, asked me to do some things. I won't stay any longer. Su Li was puzzled. What kind of things could the first divine envoy ask Nan Jinshu to do? In terms of status, the divine envoys in the illusionary god palace were at his disposal. In terms of strength, Nan Jinshu wasn't too outstanding. Why did the first divine envoy choose him? Moreover, Nan Jinshu's treatment was different from theirs from the start. He was directly sent to the illusionary god palace. Countless questions flashed through Su Li's mind, but she didn't show it on her face. She only smiled. Since it's the first divine envoy's order, I naturally can't delay it. Patriarch Nan, please. Nan Jinshu nodded and turned to leave. Su Li was taken aback. Patriarch Nan, that's the direction out of the illusionary god palace. Nan Jinshu stopped in his tracks and turned back with a smile. I'm going out of the illusionary god palace. To be honest, I'm going to the illusionary god ocean. There were very few people in the illusionary god palace who were qualified to do so. Nan Jinshu was pleased with himself, so he just said it directly. There was nothing to hide anyway. Everyone would know when he returned from the illusionary god ocean. Su Li frowned. The illusionary god ocean? Chapter 2304. Illusionary god ocean? Chu Luiyue looked up in surprise. Nan Jinshu said it himself? Su Li nodded. That's right. He looks very happy. The excitement and pride on his face are not concealed at all. This place. I've never heard of it before. Chu Luiyue thought for a while and a guess appeared in his mind. Could it be the ocean outside the heavenly gate? That's right. I followed him out of the illusionary god palace and saw him go straight to the heavenly gate. Other than that, where else can there be an ocean in the illusionary god palace? Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched and he immediately stood up. Su Li was shocked. Little you, what's wrong? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and paced around the room. He felt a little puzzled. Nothing, I just feel that this matter is a little strange. The illusionary god ocean is very dangerous. We saw it with our own eyes when we came here. Nanjinshu is just a supreme god. How could he have the guts to go there? Su Li heard and said. He said that the first divine envoy told him something, but I also feel that it's a little strange. No one has seen the first divine envoy all these years. I heard that even the 8th and 7th divine envoys were rejected. What was it that he had to do? And I saw that he was very happy. It didn't look like he was taking a risk, but more like he was going to receive a reward. In any case, it must be a good thing for him. First divine envoy, Chu Luiyue muttered. The divine envoys of the illusionary god palace were all very respected. The first divine envoy was the most respected. It could be seen from the other divine envoy's respectful attitude towards him. But the first divine envoy didn't come out when the lightning pool caused such a big commotion. Now he suddenly sent Nanjinshu to the illusionary god ocean. It's really strange. Chu Luiyue said and looked at Su Li. He's already out of the heavenly gate? Su Li nodded. When she heard Nanjinshu's words, she also felt that something was wrong and simply followed him out of the illusionary god palace. She was worried that Nanjinshu would be suspicious, so she didn't follow her. After walking for a while, she turned back to Chu Luiyue. However, she was certain that Nanjinshu had indeed gone to the Elysium. Looking at the time, he must have already left. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment, then said, I'll go out and take a look too. What? Su Li widened her beautiful eyes in surprise. How can that be? Leaving the heavenly gates was already difficult enough, let alone going to the illusionary god sea? Little you don't have the slightest bit of understanding towards the illusory god sea. Isn't it too risky for you to go there directly? Su Li disagreed. Chu Luiyue had already made up his mind. This is a rare opportunity. Su Li's lips moved. Looking at her determined expression, it was obvious that she could not be persuaded. What's in the illusionary god sea that's worthy of you acting like this? Chu Luiyue paused. It's very likely that Senior Diwu is trapped there. Su Li was shocked. Upon hearing this, she finally understood why Chu Luiyue insisted on going no matter what. But don't worry, Mr. Su. I plan to go there openly and investigate first. It won't be too late to take action after I've figured out the situation. After all, the illusionary god sea was just outside the Elysium. There would not be any danger if they just went to take a look at the Silver Bridge. Although Chu Luiyue also wanted to bring Diwu Zhangzi back immediately, she would not do anything that she was not confident of. If she took the risk now, not only would she not be able to save him, but she might even lose her life. She was very clear about this. Su Li was finally relieved. I'll go with you. Chu Luiyue shook her head. No need. I'll go with Hong Yu. The fewer people involved in this matter, the better. Su Li could only agree. Be careful. Mu Hongyu was cultivating in her room. Ever since she retrieved the Mahayana cultivation method from the Precious Treasure Pavilion, she hadn't left her room. Hongyu. Upon hearing Chu Luiyue's voice, Mu Hongyu snapped out of her daze and got up to open the door. Lu Yu, what's the matter? Chu Luiyue raised her chin. Follow me out of the Elysium and to the illusionary god sea. Mu Hongyu was stunned. Now. Chu Luiyue briefly explained the matter. It's a rare opportunity. Maybe we can gain something. Mu Hongyu hurriedly said. Then let's not wait. Let's go quickly. After taking 2 steps, she suddenly stopped. Wait, Lu Yu, how are we going to get out now? Wasn't the Elysium heavily guarded? Chu Luiyue waved her hand carelessly. When we reach the Elysium, let Jin Yunlai open the door. Mu Hongyu. She glanced at Chu Luiyue faintly. Lu Yu, how can you be sure that he'll agree? Previously, he could say that he had gone to the weapon refining saint. What about this time? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. I have my ways. The two of them walked straight and arrived at the Elysium. However, when they arrived, they were surprised to find that many people had already gathered here. It was very lively. Did Nanjinshu really leave here and go to the illusionary god ocean? I saw it with my own eyes. How can it be fake? Is he crazy? The illusionary god ocean is very dangerous. Isn't it too bold to use it to improve his cultivation? Isn't he afraid of dying there? Shoo, they're different from us. Think about it. He entered the illusionary god palace as soon as he arrived. Of course, he's different from us. It's still very dangerous, isn't it? Even venerables can only stay in the illusionary god ocean for a few hours at most. Besides, the illusionary god ocean has always been a place of punishment. Who knows how many skeletons are buried there? This is the first time I've seen someone who wants to cultivate there. Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu looked at each other. It turned out that the news had already spread. Luyu, what should we do? Mu Hongyu asked softly. Chu Luiyue paused. The heavens want to help me. I have to go. With that, she continued to walk forward. Soon, some people noticed their arrival, and they all had different expressions on their faces. Chu Luiyue ignored them. She went straight to the Elysium and was about to step out. Everyone was shocked. Buzz, the barrier buzzed. A heavy pressure stopped Chu Luiyue. Following this, a furious voice could be heard once again. Shangguanyu, what are you trying to do? Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at Jin Yunlai, who rushed over in an instant. Her eyes curved, and she smiled brightly. Seventh messenger, you're here? Can you please open the door? She was quite fast. Jin Yunlai was originally there to denounce her, but when she heard this, she choked. Then, a flame burned in her chest. What did you say? Just how much courage did she have to ask him to open the gate of heaven so naturally? Chu Liuyue's smile didn't change. I heard that Nan Jinshu went to the illusionary god ocean to improve his cultivation. I was curious. Look, everyone is here. If there's such a good thing, why don't you give us a chance and let everyone go together? Jin Yunlai's forehead twitched. Chapter 2305. He had just found out that Nan Jinshu had met the first divine emissary and obtained a passage talisman to cultivate in the illusionary god ocean. How did the news spread throughout the illusionary god palace in the blink of an eye? It even attracted so many people. Jin Yunlai's mind raced. Nan Jinshu must have been too arrogant and attracted too much attention. That's why, when he heard that Nan Jinshu had met the first divine emissary, he was shocked and thought that Nan Jinshu was quite capable. Who knew that he was a brainless person? How could such a thing be spread so casually? He suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a low voice, Nan Jinshu went with the first divine emissary's permission. If you have the ability, I won't stop you. Chu Luiyue blinked. Seventh divine emissary, that's why we want to go out and take a look. Speaking of which, I have a good relationship with family head Nan. I didn't expect him to be so powerful. Not only can he enter the illusionary god palace, but he can also meet the first divine emissary and go to the illusionary god ocean. If we can go out and take a look and see family head Nan's glory, we can learn something. What do you think? Jin Yunlai looked at her suspiciously. Just go out and take a look? Yes. Didn't family head Nan go to the illusionary god ocean? We'll just take a look from the bridge. After all, it wasn't easy for us to come up here. We know how dangerous the illusionary god ocean is. Why would we gamble with our lives? Mu Hongyu immediately nodded. Yes, we're just going to take a look. Anyway, this is the illusionary god palace's territory. Are you worried that we'll do something out of line? Jin Yunlai's expression was cold. This group of people gathered here and even asked him to open the door. They were already out of line. What else did they want? Many people around them looked at each other. Actually, they were also very curious. It would be good if they could really go and take a look. Jin Yunlai said in a low voice. What kind of place is the illusionary god ocean? Is it somewhere you can go as you please? Even if they stood on the bridge and watched, it was absolutely not allowed. I'll let you go this time, but if you do it again, I won't let you off so easily. As he spoke, he looked around with undisguised warning in his eyes. Everyone's little thoughts were suppressed again. After Jin Yunlai finished speaking, she turned around to leave. Chu Luiyue suddenly sighed softly. Sigh, since the seventh divine emissary is unwilling to let us pass, then we can only forget about it. Since I have nothing to do, let's take a walk around Fengming Mountain. Jin Yunlai stopped in her tracks. He turned around and stared at Chu Luiyue. What are you trying to do? To find Dumpling. Chu Liuyue's lips curved slightly. Since I can't go to the Mirage God Sea, I can only find Dumpling to relieve my boredom. Recently, she has been making a fuss about going out to play a few rounds. If there's no other way, I should ask the second messenger if he can bring Dumpling out for a walk. You! She was clearly using Dumpling to threaten him. Now the second messenger valued Dumpling a lot, and Dumpling was extremely dependent on Chu Luyue. She was still young and was at the age where she could make a fuss. In addition, she already knew that Yi Zhao was trapped in the lightning pool, so she was now full of hostility towards the Mirage God Palace. If Chu Luyue said something to Dumpling and caused Dumpling to explode, who knew what she would do? This Chu Luyue really knew how to push her luck. He had already made an exception to let her go the last time, but she still wanted to do it again. Chu Luyue looked at Mu Hongyu. Hongyu, you haven't seen Dumpling for a long time, right? I'll bring her out. 2 hours. Jin Yunlai coldly interrupted Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue sneered. Seventh messenger, what can you do in 2 hours? Are you afraid that I'll learn something from Nanjin Shu? Jin Yunlai's face was cold. After a while she said, I'll give you 1 day. If you're not back by this time tomorrow. Chu Luyue immediately smiled. Deal. The Mirage God Sea is extremely dangerous. After leaving the Heavenly Gate, I won't care if you live or die. You will bear all the consequences yourselves. Chu Luyue nodded with a relaxed expression. Of course. Since she dared to go, she was prepared. Jin Yunlai coldly stared at her for a while before waving her sleeve. Buzz, the barrier opened. Chu Luyue stepped out without hesitation. Hongyu, follow me. Coming. Mu Hongyu's movements were very fast, and she almost caught up with him. The two figures quickly disappeared. Many people looked at each other. After a while, a young man tentatively stepped forward. Jin Yunlai didn't stop him. That person immediately felt relieved and lifted his foot to walk out. With someone taking the lead, the people behind him moved faster. Soon, more than 10 people left the Heavenly Gate. However, not everyone chose to do so. No matter what, the illusionary God Sea is extremely dangerous. What if I really die there if I go out like this? That's true. I think Nanjin Shu must have a trump card if he dares to go. I'm afraid we can't compete. Forget it, forget it. The first messenger hasn't come out for many years. She didn't even meet the other messengers. Now that she's meeting Nanjin Shu alone, isn't that enough to explain the problem? Anyway, I don't think I'm that capable. I won't join in the fun. Why don't we wait until this time tomorrow and see what Shangguan Yu and the others have to say? Some people left the Heavenly Gate, while others chose to stay. Jin Yunlai snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves and left. She wanted to see how capable Chu Luyue was. As soon as Jin Yunlai returned to the Mirage God Palace, she went straight in a certain direction. She didn't walk far before she bumped into Xu Jing. Needless to say, she came from the sixth messenger again. Jin Yunlai had been looking for an opportunity to ask her how the sixth messenger was doing. However, now that she saw her, she couldn't be bothered to ask. Xu Jing was also in a hurry. Her eyes were filled with shock. Seventh messenger, I just heard that Nanjin Shu went to the Mirage God Sea after meeting the first messenger? Jin Yunlai nodded. Her expression was cold. They've been there for a while. Moreover, the news has spread in the Mirage God Palace. Everyone knows. Shangguan Yu even made a fuss about going out to take a look. Is she crazy? Xu Jing suddenly raised her voice. Seventh messenger, you didn't let her go, did you? She threatened me with Dumpling. After much consideration, I let her go. Other than her, some people from the Mirage God Palace also followed her. Xu Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Luyue was crazy, and the seventh messenger wasn't clear-headed either? Her reaction made Jin Yunlai frown. The news spread like wildfire in a short period of time. The more you don't let them go, the more curious they are. Why don't you just let them go for a day and let them see for themselves? The Mirage God Sea. Is it a place they can step into as they wish? Everyone had a deep-rooted bad habit. There were some principles that no one would listen to no matter how many times you repeated them. Only when they felt the pain themselves would they deeply understand and remember it. Chapter 2306. Xu Jing's expression softened. Jin Yunlai's words weren't without reason. For 10,000 years, the Mirage God Ocean had been under the control of the first divine envoy. It was heavily guarded and dangerous. The Yu Qian had inherited almost all the rights of the first divine envoy, except for this one. So until now, even the Yu Qian couldn't enter the Mirage God Ocean without the permission of the first divine envoy. Chu Luiyue and the others were indeed digging their own graves. Xu Jing thought of something else and frowned. What did Nanjin Shu do? Why is the first divine envoy willing to see him? Also, this happened not long ago. How did everyone know about it? Jin Yunlai shook her head and continued walking. I don't know. So, I plan to ask the first divine envoy again. Xu Jing hurriedly said. I'll go too. When the two of them arrived, they saw two people walking out of the door. They were two young men who looked to be in their mid-20s. One was handsome, and the other was delicate. Both of them had extraordinary temperaments. Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing were shocked when they saw them. Jiulong Xian Yu. These two were the 9th and 10th divine envoys. They were both cultivating in seclusion. Why did they suddenly come here? And it seemed like they had just met the first divine envoy. Jiulong and Shi Yan looked over and greeted them. Greetings, 7th and 8th divine envoys. Jin Yunlai glanced at the two of them. Have you met the first divine envoy? The two of them nodded. The first divine envoy ordered us to go to the god-slaying tomb in the divine ruins world immediately. We are about to leave. The first divine envoy gave the order personally? Xu Jing couldn't believe it. One had to know that that person hadn't cared about the illusory god palace for many years. This was too sudden. Jin Yunlai suddenly realized something. Could it be because of Nanjin Shu? Sure enough, Xian immediately explained. Rumor has it that the third score is most likely there, so the first oracle sent the two of us to look for it together. Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing were both shocked. Then they finally understood. No wonder the first divine envoy suddenly made such a big move. It was because of this. Although there were many divine envoys in the illusory god palace, there were very few who had the time and energy to do so. These two were indeed the most suitable choices. Jiulong said. If there's nothing else, we'll be taking our leave. After all, this was a task that the first oracle had personally given them. They did not dare to slack off. Jin Yunlai nodded. The two of them quickly left. Looking at the backs of the two people, Xu Jing frowned. After thinking for a moment, she walked towards the door. However, he was stopped by a barrier as soon as he arrived. A low and indifferent voice came from inside. Just do what you have to do. Xu Jing and his assistant were both stunned. Does this mean that he doesn't want us to intervene? Xu Jing was unwilling to give up. First oracle, this is a matter of great importance. Isn't it not enough to send only the two of them? After a moment, the voice came again. Xu Jing, if you don't want to look after the herb mountain anymore, you can go with them. Xu Jing's face suddenly turned pale and he took a few steps back. Xu Jing has offended you. Please forgive me, first oracle. Jin Yunlai also fell silent. The first oracle's meaning was very clear. There was really no need to continue asking. He cupped his hands and left. Then we won't disturb you anymore. After saying that, he gave Xu Jing a look. Xu Jing walked a few steps and suddenly thought of something. He paused and asked hesitantly, First oracle, the sixth oracle's divine body has been damaged. If you want to rebuild it, you need to use the golden Tianlei in the lightning pool. But now that the lightning pool is sealed, do you think? Originally, everything was going smoothly. They were just waiting for the right time. Who knew that the lightning pool would suddenly riot and disrupt their plans? If they couldn't rebuild the divine body as soon as possible, wouldn't the pills that she had painstakingly refined go to waste? Now, she didn't know when the lightning pool would be unsealed. Who knew how long they would have to wait? Therefore, she could only try to ask the first oracle for help. The courtyard quieted down, and a layer of coldness gradually surged out. Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat, and she suddenly felt uneasy. Then she heard the person inside say coldly, Then let him suffer. Even after walking for a long distance, Xu Jing's heart still did not calm down. She walked a little absent-mindedly, and her eyes were unfocused. It wasn't until Jin Yunlai was about to go in another direction that she came back to her senses. She quickly walked a few steps and came in front of Jin Yunlai. When did the sixth oracle offend the first oracle? Jin Yunlai frowned. How would I know? Xu Jing's lips were still a little pale. She couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. This can't be. The first oracle has been in seclusion for many years, but the sixth oracle just came back not long ago. How could he offend the first oracle? Moreover, the first oracle is indifferent and rarely gets angry. But just now, when she mentioned the sixth divine envoy, the first divine envoy's voice contained a rare hint of anger. Jin Yunlai also heard it. This was different from the time when she wanted to rush in and annoy the first oracle. The sixth oracle seemed to have made a big mistake. So much so that the first oracle refused to help him rebuild his divine body. To him, this was clearly a piece of cake. Xu Jing suddenly thought of something, and her expression changed slightly. That's right, when the sixth oracle mentioned the first oracle, he seemed to be very frightened. At that time, she only thought that he was in awe and didn't think much of it. But now that she thought about it, Jin Yunlai looked at her and said, if you really want to know, why don't you just ask the sixth oracle? At this moment, Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu walked out of the divine gate and arrived at the silver bridge again. Chu Luiyue looked around as she walked. Soon, she saw a familiar figure. Nan Jinshu. Mu Hongyu immediately followed her gaze. Where is he? Above the deep blue sea in the distance, there was a person flying through the air. It was Nan Jinshu. He went deeper into the illusionary god sea before stopping. Then he rushed directly into the illusionary god sea. Chapter 2307. The onlookers on the silver bridge grew restless when they saw this. Nan Jinshu actually went in just like that? Even Her Eminence can't stay in the Mirage God Ocean for too long. Where did he get his confidence from? The Mirage God Ocean contains an abundant amount of energy. It can greatly increase one's strength if one refines one's bones and blood, but it's also extremely dangerous. I wonder how long it'll take for Nan Jinshu to come back up. Chu Liuyue's expression hardened. Waves surged in the distance, and the aura was piercingly cold. Even though he was standing on the silver bridge, he could still clearly feel the terrifying power contained in the sea below. Even she didn't have much confidence that she would be able to return safely after going down. Nan Jinshu. She held her breath and focused. While keeping an eye on Nan Jinshu's situation, she also listened carefully to her surroundings. I wonder if Diwu Zhangzi can sense the changes outside. She glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw that Mu Hongyu seemed to have entered a meditative state. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and her expression was calm. She was looking at the Mirage God Ocean. The noise on the silver bridge gradually dissipated. As time passed, the crowd gradually quieted down. Many people were curious about the Mirage God Ocean and wanted to go down to take a look, but none of them had made up their minds to do so. After all, everyone only had one life. Moreover, the seventh divine emissary had made it very clear that once they left the heaven gate, they would die regardless of whether they lived or died. When the time came, they wouldn't even have anyone to call for help. Thus, everyone waited in tacit understanding. It wouldn't be too late to make a decision after Nan Jinshu's situation cleared up. After a long while, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Chu Luiyue was a little disappointed and worried. I wonder how Diwu Zhangzi is doing. Mu Hongyu, on the other hand, changed her position and looked in another direction. Chu Luiyue didn't disturb her. Suddenly, the crowd became restless again. Chu Luiyue instinctively turned around and saw two young men walking out of the heavenly gate one after another. These were two completely unfamiliar faces, but Chu Luiyue could vaguely guess the other party's identity the moment she saw them. Judging from his noble aura, he was probably an oracle as well. Sure enough, some sharp-eyed people had already recognized the identities of these two people and hurriedly bowed. Greetings, 9th and 10th divine emissaries. Hearing this, the remaining people immediately bowed. Jiolong and Shi Yan only nodded slightly. They didn't say anything and walked down. When he passed by Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. Jiolong suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Chu Luiyue. Are you Shangguanyu? Chu Luiyue looked up. The young man's face was filled with curiosity and inquiry. Chu Luiyue nodded. Exactly. Jiolong laughed. You're quite capable. This didn't sound like a compliment. Shi Yan glanced over. Jiulong, let's go. The two of them had always had a good relationship, so the way they addressed each other was more casual. Jiulong retracted her gaze and followed Shi Yan. The two of them arrived at the bottom of the silver bridge. Then, with a flash of their figures, they disappeared from the spot. Divine emissaries were all above the god realm, so crossing the illusion god sea wasn't a problem for them. But the question was, where were they going? The two oracles actually left the heaven gate. What are they doing? These two rarely show their faces in public. That's right. This is the first time I've seen them after so many years. I didn't expect them to be here. All sorts of discussions broke out. There were also a few people silently sizing up Chu Luiyue. What did the ninth divine emissary mean by that? Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. In truth, she had caused a lot of trouble in the illusion god palace recently, so it was normal for the oracles to be curious about her. What she wanted to know more was why these two had gone to the divine ruins world. For two oracles to be dispatched at the same time, it must be no small matter. After thinking for a while, she couldn't find any clues, so she temporarily suppressed this thought. Master, Yu Jiao and Shi Yan went out. I think it has something to do with Nanjing Shu. In the room, Rong Xiu sat behind the table, reading a book in his hand. Hearing Yan Qing's words, he replied with a and flipped a page of the book. Other than that, there was no other reaction. Yan Qing hesitated for a moment and asked, "Why don't I go and find out where they went?" Rong Xiu's thin lips curved. No need to ask. They went to the god-slaying mound. God-slaying mound? Yan Qing was shocked. Why are they going to the god-slaying mound at this time? For the last zither score, of course. Other than that, what else could make the illusion god palace do such a big thing? Yan Qing frowned. That zither score is also very important to Madam. If they find it first, they won't find it. Rong Xiu laughed, put down the book and looked out the window. It will belong to whoever it belongs to. Yan Qing retreated from the room. He was a little worried at first, but judging from his master's reaction, it seemed that he didn't care too much about it. Wind Element Pill. 1 Platycladus orientalis, 3 Huai Mingzi, 1 Golden Sandvine. Little Hachi's lazy voice came. Yan Qing looked up and saw Little Hachi and Jian Fengqi sitting face to face in the yard. Jian Fengqi was holding a book in his hand, and there was a pile of herbs on the stone table in front of him. Listening to Little Hachi lazily reciting the prescription of the wind element pill, Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched. You really know everything on this list. Little Hachi chuckled and picked a Jinling fruit. Her delicate hands were slender and delicate, as if they were carved out of jade. They seemed to be more crystal clear than the Jinling fruit. She put the Jinling fruit into her mouth, and her voice was a little muffled. I told you before, I've already broken through to the Supreme Doctor level, but you didn't believe me. Tiske, this time he learned his lesson. Jian Fengqi suddenly felt a headache coming on. He closed the book in his hand and took a deep breath. There's no way I can survive. Ever since he was deeply hurt by Chu Luiyue, Jian Fengqi silently prepared to work hard, vowing to win back his pride. Thinking that Little Hachi was also a celestial physician, he wanted to compare notes with her. However, Little Hachi rejected him, and the reason was very simple. He was not qualified. With Jian Fengqi's temper, how could he stand this? He immediately asked for a test. However, Little Hachi directly handed over a prescription. Although he hadn't broken through, he could see that the pills on the list were all at the Supreme Doctor level. Then, Little Hachi really did recite it backwards. Young Master Jian, don't talk about Master. Even if you compare yourself to me, you're still a little brother. Jian Fengqi put down the book and stood up angrily. Little Hachi smiled and waved her hand generously. This book is for you. No need to thank me. Jian Fengqi turned around, picked up the book, and left angrily. Chapter 2308. Tisk, it's been so many years. Haven't you suffered enough blows yet? Little Hachi smiled leisurely. Your courage is commendable. Jian Fengqi staggered and walked even faster. After a while, his figure disappeared outside the door. Well, it was obvious that he had gone to the Herb Mountain. Little Hachi was in a good mood after dealing a blow to the proud young Master Jian in all aspects. She glanced around and saw Yan Qing. She smiled and said, "Oh, Lord Yenqing, where are you going?" Her greeting was just a casual greeting. Who would have thought that Yenqing would take a step forward and walk over to her? When he was 3 steps away from Little 8, he stopped and stood still. His figure was thin and tall. With Little 8 sitting on him and standing on him, he appeared even more oppressive. Jian Fengqi is 27 years old this year. If I remember correctly, he should be older than you, right? Little Hachi was stunned. She was still chewing on the Jinling fruit. When she came to her senses, her eyes curved and she burst out laughing. "Lord Yenqing, I was just joking. You don't have to take it seriously." Yenqing pursed his lips slightly. Little Hachi blinked her beautiful eyes. She stood up and moved closer. The distance between the two of them was instantly shortened. "Lord Yenqing." Little Hachi's cheeks were still puffed up. When she opened her mouth, a sweet fruity fragrance spread out. It was the taste of the Jinling fruit in her mouth. Yenqing's eyes landed on her moist and plump red lips for a moment. Then he quietly looked away. Little Hachi did not notice. She smiled and said, "You don't seem very happy." Yenqing's voice was cold. "I've always been like this. I'm not happy or unhappy." Little Hachi snorted in her heart. Everyone had 7 emotions and 6 desires. This Lord Yenqing seemed to be an exception. She turned around and smiled, the smoke swirling around her. "If young Master Jian can be my younger brother, then Lord Yenqing can also be my elder brother. You see, your status is much higher than his." Yenqing frowned. Little Hachi tilted her head. "Brother Yenqing?" The originally light and sweet fragrance seemed to have suddenly become rich and thick, making people a little intoxicated. Her voice had always been soft and gentle, and he had long since gotten used to it. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt that something was different, as if his heart had been gently scratched by something. Yenqing turned around and left. Sigh. Seeing that there was no response from the other party, Little 8 pursed her lips and swallowed the fruit in her mouth. "I can't call you little brother or big brother. You're really hard to please." Yenqing went straight back to her room. As soon as she entered the room, she immediately felt that something was wrong and looked up at the screen. Her cold gaze was as sharp as a knife, as if she was going to cut the screen. "Come out." "Sigh, it's not like you don't know it's me. Can't you be nicer?" A figure slowly walked out from behind. It was Umo. Yenqing's expression did not change. "If I didn't know it's you, you would have died here." A strange smile appeared on Umo's face as he said word by word, "You're too fierce, Brother Yenqing, big brother." As soon as he finished speaking, a strong wind attacked. Swish! Umo was shocked and immediately dodged. He patted his chest with lingering fear. "TSK, we were talking nicely. Why did you hit me?" Yenqing's eyes were as cold as ice. "If you want to die, I can send you on your way." Umo snorted. "I haven't lived long enough. Forget it." How interesting it was to live. Yenqing was speechless because of a girl's words. If he died, he would not be able to see such a wonderful scene. "No wonder you're Madam's subordinate. Little Hachi, you're really awesome. If you have something to say, just say it. If not, get lost." It was rare for Yenqing to say so many words to him, but it was not good. Umo silently held back a tear of sympathy for himself and then said, "I'm here to talk to you about something serious. The first oracle sent Jiolong and Shi Yan to the god-slaying tomb. You already know, right?" Yenqing nodded. The news was sent by Nanjin Shu. By right, Jun Jiuqing should know about it, but he didn't say anything. And after that, he went into seclusion. "I feel something is wrong." Yenqing frowned. "What do you mean?" Umo took a deep breath and said seriously. He went to the main hall of the palace of the illusory god. Time passed slowly. It was still calm above the sea. Nanjin Shu still hadn't come out. If it weren't for the fact that the surrounding energy kept flowing in Nanjin Shu's direction, everyone would have thought something had happened to him. After a while, Mu Hongyu finally came back to her senses and went to Chu Luiyue. "Luyu." Chu Luiyue turned to look at her. Their eyes met. Mu Hongyu frowned and shook her head. She had already tested it. Under the illusory god ocean, the space was indeed distorted. But standing on the silver bridge, she couldn't check it out because of the water. She had tried a few methods, but none of them worked. Chu Liuyue's eyes flickered. Then she made up her mind. I'll go down and take a look. Since she couldn't see the whole picture here, she might as well go down and check it out. Mu Hongyu was shocked and quickly pulled her wrist. No. It was too dangerous down there. Even she wasn't confident that she could avoid the distorted space. Not to mention Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue shook her head. This was a rare opportunity. If she could figure out the situation down there, it would be easier for Mu Hongyu to take action later. Hearing the conversation between the two of them, many people around them looked over in surprise. Shangguanyu wants to go down there? She's too bold. I heard that she crossed the sea very easily before. She even brought a few high gods with her. She must be quite confident, right? That's different from this. The illusory god ocean. She might not be able to come back up after going down. Besides, she doesn't have the first divine envoy's permission. Isn't she just digging her own grave? Let's just wait and see. If one had the first divine envoy's permission, they would have an extra layer of protection in the illusory god ocean. Wasn't Nan Jinshu the same? However, almost no one planned to go down like Chu Luyue. A long time ago, there were people who tried to sneak into the illusory god ocean. In the end, all of them died and their souls were destroyed. That was why everyone was so afraid. Even though they were already standing on the silver bridge, they didn't dare to go down. Upon hearing that, Mu Hongyu gritted her teeth. I'll go with you. She might be able to help her a little. Chu Luyue shook her head. It's better for you to wait here. After all, she could better spy on the changes and movements in the illusory god ocean. I'll be back soon. With that, Chu Luyue patted her hand gently. Then, she tiptoed and headed in Nan Jinshu's direction. Chapter 2309. Chu Luyue was very fast. The blue-black sea was surging, mysterious and unfathomable. The sea breeze carried a hint of coolness as it brushed past her face, lifting her hair and skirt. Thick energies intertwined, forming an enormous pressure that even made the space above the sea as difficult to traverse. Chu Liuyue's body flickered with a dazzling light. Whoosh! She summoned the Star Darkness sword and gripped it tightly in her hand. A faint golden light flickered, appearing especially bright and eye-catching in this dark sky and sea. The further she went, the heavier the pressure. The smell of blood gradually spread in the air. It was very faint, but it could not be ignored. Chu Liuyue's heart trembled. Suddenly, her footsteps paused as she stared ahead. A deep whirlpool had appeared on the surface of the sea not far away from her. The surrounding seawater flowed quietly without the slightest sound. If not for the fact that Chu Luyue was standing very close, she probably would not have noticed it. Streams of incomparably vigorous power also surged downwards. A figure was faintly discernible. Chu Luyue only needed a glance to recognize that person. It was Nan Jinshu. At this moment, there was a palm-sized seal floating quietly above his head. His entire body was suffused with a layer of faint red light, forming a natural barrier. Those fierce surges of energy collided with it and were silently swallowed without any sound. The power contained in that seal was powerful and noble, and clearly did not come from Nan Jinshu. That was the seal of the first divine emissary. Chu Liuyue's heart trembled as she moved closer, wanting to see it more clearly. She was very curious about this first divine emissary. After coming to the Illusion God Palace, she had seen several divine emissaries. But the most mysterious one was the first divine emissary. Even if she had not seen him, she could clearly feel that the first divine emissary's status was far higher than the other divine emissaries. Even the second divine emissary, Yu Qian, was the same. Moreover, he was in charge of the illusion god ocean. If she wanted to save Di Wu Zhangze, she had to find a way to get past the first divine emissary. However, after walking forward for a short distance, she felt an invisible force stopping her from going any further. Chu Luyue frowned slightly. This aura. Why does it seem so familiar? He couldn't describe the specific feeling, but there was indeed an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Chu Luyue furrowed his brows and thought for a while, but to no avail. He could only put this idea aside for the time being. Nan Jinshu's aura kept growing stronger. Chu Luyue hesitated for a moment before finally rushing into the illusionary god sea. In the lonely and quiet cage, Dugu Mabao suddenly opened his eyes and frowned. A moment later, a cloud of black fog condensed outside the cage. A hoarse and gloomy laugh came from inside. She actually went to the illusionary god C. It can be seen that she really cares about Di Wu. In order to save him, he didn't even hesitate to take such a risk. TSK, even if Di Wu dies this time, he should be able to rest in peace, right? Even though he was smiling, his tone was filled with hatred as he gnashed his teeth. Di Wu Zhangze suddenly betrayed him back then. This debt had yet to be settled. Dugu Mabao's brows gradually relaxed, and he returned to his usual cold and indifferent appearance. Isn't it natural for her to go to the illusionary god Sea? Including Herb Mountain, Lightning Pool, Phoenix Cry Mountain, and even the illusionary god Palace. Where can she not go? Of course she can't go now. The person opposite him seemed to be infuriated, and his voice became shrill. Don't forget who is in charge of the illusionary god Sea now. She's just digging her own grave by going there this time. Dugu Mabao suddenly laughed and mocked. You don't even dare to kill me, let alone her? The person in the black fog suddenly fell silent. After a long while. You're right. I won't take any of your lives now. However, if you think that I can't do anything to you, you're too naive. When Lan Shao reconstructed his divine body, he swallowed a total of 5 golden Tianlei, right? Dugu Mabao's heart suddenly sank. Then he heard the voice say again. The 6th divine envoy needs to reconstruct his divine body now, but unfortunately, the lightning pool has been sealed, so it's been delayed. Although I can't kill Lan Shao, it's easy for me to take the power of the Tianlei in his body. Splash! Chu Luiyue rushed into the sea. In an instant, a bone-chilling coldness surrounded him from all directions. It was as if dense steel needles were stabbing him endlessly. It was as if they wanted to pierce through his flesh and bones. Chu Luiyue waved her hand lightly, and a beautiful transparent barrier surrounded her. With this barrier's protection, the bone-chilling coldness lessened significantly. She looked forward. She could see Nan Jinshu's figure more clearly here. The vortex continued to suck in the surrounding energy, and in the end, all of it poured into his head from the top of his head. He closed his eyes, clenched his fists and frowned. He seemed to be in pain. The power of the seawater was enough to kill a high god on the spot. That was why even Her Eminence had to go through a lot of torture here. This was the result of him being protected by the seal. If Nan Jinshu came here himself, he wouldn't be any better than those high gods. A thin ray of light suddenly appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. The seawater surged, and the ray of light drifted over with the waves. Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a deep sense of unease. She turned around and went to the side. The thread-like light floated past her feet. An extremely thin black spatial crack appeared. Chu Luiyue's pupils contracted. Chapter 23:10. This was no ordinary stream of light. It was the squeezing force produced when different spaces intersected. Chu Luiyue held her breath, her temples throbbing. If she had not dodged in time, she would have. She looked down and saw that stream of light quickly dissipate. However, in the depths of this sea, there were similar streams of light that were faintly discernible. Mu Hongyu had said before that under the illusory god sea, countless spatial forces intersected, and it was extremely dangerous. Now it seemed that she was right. If Di Wu Zhangze was really trapped down here. Chu Luiyue gritted her teeth. Di Wu Zhangze did not have a divine body, and did not have an advantage to begin with. If he went through so much torture, the mastermind purposely separated Di Wu Zhangze and Dugu Mabao, and locked him up here alone. Why? At this moment, she suddenly felt a chill on her back. Her heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, she immediately turned around and swung her sword. Piercingly cold sword chi flew out. Pest! There was the faint sound of something being cut apart. A slender stream of light was instantly cut into 2. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly. Then, she suddenly thought of something, and looked at Nan Jinshu again. He was firmly protected by that sigil. Those strange streams of light all avoided him, and could not hurt him at all. No wonder. The first divine envoy's sigil was indeed interesting. Chu Luiyue had a thought, and dove down. The further down she went, the more streams of light there were. They were like seaweed, drifting freely on the bottom of the sea, but they carried fatal lethality. Gradually, when they brushed past Chu Luiyue, she would feel a slight pain. Her divine body was almost unable to withstand the spatial power here. Chu Luiyue knew this very well. However, she did not stop. She did not even slow down. She held her sword in her hand, and as if she was cutting through brambles, she cut and dispersed all of them. After an unknown period of time, a ball of light finally appeared in her sight. All of the streams of light flew out from this place. Some drifted into the distance, constantly tearing apart space, while some intertwined with each other, causing energy to scatter chaotically. She faintly felt a sense of uneasiness in her heart and finally stopped. Within that ball of light, a figure was faintly discernible. Chu Luiyue stared intently. Of course, she wanted to go, but she knew very well that it was too dangerous. Just by standing there, she was already out of breath. If she were to move forward. Suddenly, a strange fluctuation came from the interspatial ring on her finger. Chu Luiyue was stunned and subconsciously looked down. Suddenly, a stone rolled out from within. It gently floated down. Chu Luiyue immediately stretched out his hand to grab it, but the rock easily dodged and then ran down at an even faster speed. Just as Chu Luiyue was filled with doubts, a stream of light flew over and was about to cut the stone. Chu Luiyue frowned. Although she didn't mean to bring these stones back, after a long time, she still had some feelings for them. Especially since these stones had helped her a lot in the past and saved her from danger several times. Naturally, she couldn't bear to part with them. Just as she was about to make a move, a scene suddenly happened in front of her, causing her to pause. She saw that the stones suddenly emitted a warm orange light. That was the god domain inside. This god domain completely enveloped the stone. Then, that silver thread-like stream of light flew over and automatically wrapped around the stone, merging into the god domain. Chu Luiyue was shocked and almost suspected that she had seen wrongly. She closed her eyes and looked again. The scene in front of her had not changed at all. The stone floated silently in the air, easily neutralizing the ferocious energy contained in the streak of light. At first glance, it looked like a thin thread tied to the stone. Since the stone did not move, the thread could only float gently on the spot. Chu Luiyue blinked. Is this stabilizing that small space? Just as she was filled with shock, a second stone rolled out of the universe ring. Just like the previous one, this one ran to another location. After wrapping around a stream of light, it stayed there quietly. Chu Luiyue almost immediately felt that the chaotic and heavy pressure around her had lessened a little. Although it was very subtle, it was indeed there. Just as she was stunned, more and more stones ran out and spread out in all directions. At this moment, Mu Hongyu was standing on the silver bridge and waiting anxiously. She stared in the direction where Chu Luiyue had disappeared. Her hands were clasped together, and her heart was hanging high. Lu Yu had already gone down for a while. Why was there no movement at all? Gradually, all kinds of discussions could be heard around her. It's been so long, but Shangguanyu still hasn't returned. Could something have happened to her? I don't think so. I heard that she has a few trump cards on her. Other things aside, she should have no problem staying alive. That's hard to say. It's risky to enter the Mirage God Ocean without the first divine envoy's permission. Mu Hongyu frowned. At this moment, she was suddenly shocked. She looked at the sea in the distance, and a trace of disbelief flashed across her eyes. The countless intersecting spaces under the sea seemed to be gradually stabilizing. She took a few steps forward, not daring to breathe too loudly, afraid that she was mistaken. However, everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. The scene in her mind was gradually becoming clearer. Nan Jinshu soon noticed that something was wrong. That was because the energy flowing into his body was gradually decreasing. At a certain moment, he finally opened his eyes and looked up. The vortex had shrunk a lot compared to before. Naturally, the energy contained in it could not be compared to before. How could this be? Nan Jinshu frowned. The energy in the Mirage God Ocean was endless. He was just taking a drop in the ocean to increase his cultivation base. Why was this not working? Soon, he realized that the reason for this was that the energy around him seemed to have dispersed a lot compared to before. Many of them were moving toward the depths of the sea. He took the opportunity to look down. It was fine if he did not look, but when he did, he was immediately horrified. In the depths of the dark sea, balls of light were quietly flickering. They were very close to each other. At a glance, they looked like a pile of gorgeous lights. However, he soon realized that this was not the case. That was because those balls of light were emitting a unique pressure. He was familiar with this feeling. That's a god domain? Nan Jinshu muttered in disbelief. Then, a light suddenly flashed across his mind. Shangguan Yu. Isn't that her 3,000 god domains? She's here too, and she's even using her god domain to devour the energy in the Mirage God Ocean? Digression. An ink-stained February floated by. Fifth update. Around 7 a.m. Chapter 23:11. Chu Luiyue crossed her arms and looked at the balls of gorgeous god territory floating in front of her. She rubbed her glabella as if she had a headache. It shouldn't have been like this. She just wanted to check out the situation first so that Mu Hongyu could rescue Di Wu Zhangzi after she broke through to the Mahayana realm. She didn't expect to cause such a big commotion. She wanted to try to stop them, but she soon realized it was useless. These stones were sometimes obedient and sometimes disobedient. If they really made a scene, she couldn't do anything about it. Then it became like this. The countless intersecting spaces under the illusionary god ocean were almost all frozen. There was no longer that oppressive aura around. In short, it was very stable. Unfortunately, there was a barrier at the bottom that trapped Di Wu Zhangzi. She tried to get closer, but she couldn't. It was also the only area that the 3,000 god territories hadn't touched yet. As for the other places around, Chu Luiyue could even feel the slightest ripple in her surroundings. Shangguan Yu. Nan Jinshu's voice came from above, sounding flustered and exasperated. Chu Luiyue looked up and waved her hand. Patriarch Nan. What a coincidence. Nan Jinshu's breath was stuck in his chest. Coincidence? Who's so coincidental with you? Why are you here? Nan Jinshu came to Chu Luiyue and questioned her coldly. Chu Luiyue smiled. If Patriarch Nan can be here, why can't I? Nan Jinshu snorted. I came with the permission of the first divine envoy. Of course, I'm different from you. You barged in here and used your god territory to forcibly take away the power that originally belonged to me. Shangguan Yu, you've gone too far. If they were in the divine ruins realm, Nan Jinshu wouldn't have the confidence and courage to speak to Chu Luiyue like this. After all, the entire Nan family was almost destroyed by Chu Luiyue. He was deeply afraid and traumatized by her. But this was the illusionary god ocean. How could someone like her, who didn't have a bloodline totem, be compared to him? Nan Jinshu's plan had been going well, and everything had been going smoothly. Of course, he was upset that someone had interrupted him halfway. Therefore he spoke very harshly. Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly, and her gaze quickly swept past the seal in his hands before she smiled lightly. Nan family head, I really didn't mean it. How could I have thought that Nan family head? You actually couldn't even snatch a pile of stones. Nan Jinshu choked and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. How is this a pile of rocks? These were clearly deity domains. Furthermore, these divine territories were all under her control. How could she possibly escape responsibility? Chu Luiyue turned around and waved at a rock not far away. All right, time to go back. The rock retreated, and the light around it became even more resplendent. At the same time, it began to devour the surrounding power at an even more astonishing rate. Chu Luiyue sighed and shrugged at Nan Jinshu. Nan family head, you saw it too. They really didn't listen to me. If she had a choice, she wouldn't have made such a big deal out of it. Nan Jinshu's eyes twitched violently. For a moment, he felt deeply humiliated. However, Chu Luiyue's expression was so sincere that he couldn't think of anything to refute her. Only then did he realize that the space here seemed to be under Chu Luiyue's control. It was no longer a threat to her. The illusionary god ocean. Wasn't the illusionary god ocean extremely dangerous? Why was it suddenly different when it came to Chu Luiyue? He had relied on the first divine envoy's seal to barely protect himself. What about her? She relied on these rocks. Nan Jinshu couldn't help but look at the seal in his hand. He suddenly felt that all his previous plans were a joke. As long as Chu Luiyue was here, he wouldn't be able to continue cultivating. He gritted his teeth and said, The first divine envoy will know. The first divine envoy will definitely find out what you've done. Let's see how you explain yourself then. Chu Luiyue nodded in agreement. That's great. I'd like to meet him too. Nan Jinshu's chest tightened. He felt that if he continued talking to Chu Luiyue, he would die of anger first. Nan Jinshu turned to leave when he realized that he couldn't get an explanation. He wanted to see how the first divine envoy would punish her. Wait! Chu Luiyue suddenly called out to him. Nan family head, there's something I don't understand. Can you explain it to me? Nan Jinshu said impatiently without turning his head. Go ahead and find out what you want to know. You're very capable anyway, aren't you? But the next moment, Chu Luiyue's figure moved, and she appeared in front of him, blocking his path. Nan family head, why are you in such a hurry to leave? It doesn't matter if you leave earlier or later. It won't affect your cultivation too much. Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Nan Jinshu's lips moved, but when he saw the Star Spectre sword appear in her hand, he swallowed his words and changed the topic. What do you want to know? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. It's not a big deal. I'm just curious. Where did you get this seal? Nan Jinshu was stunned. He said coldly. The first divine envoy gave it to me personally, of course. That's right. Why would he give it to you? Chu Luiyue nodded and took another step forward. The divine envoys have asked to meet him many times, but the first divine envoy has refused to meet him. However, Nan family head, you're very capable. Not only did you meet him, you even got this seal. I've been curious about this. Please tell me more about it. Nan Jinshu's eyes widened. What did you say? Shangguanyu, what are you dreaming about? Why should I tell you? This was the biggest secret of the Nan family and Family E. It also involved the palace of the illusory god. How could he tell Chu Luiyue? Chu Luiyue smiled kindly. I'm just a little curious. Why won't you tell me? Nan Jinshu ignored her and was about to leave. Whoosh! A piercingly cold sword chi pierced over, brushing past the top of his head. Nan Jinshu's movements suddenly froze as a chill ran down his spine. At this moment, he clearly realized that it was extremely easy for Chu Luiyue to kill him if she wanted to. Shangguanyu, don't you dare! Swoosh! A cold blade was pressed against his neck. Chu Luiyue chuckled. Do you think I'd dare? Nan Jinshu's body tensed. He swallowed hard and sneered. It's good that you know. It's related to you anyway. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Then, she heard Nan Jinshu say word by word. You have the first two pieces of music scores. You're quite capable. Unfortunately, you won't get the last one no matter what. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Nan Jinshu knew where the third piece of music score was. Where is the third one? She asked coldly. Before Nan Jinshu could speak, the seal in his hand suddenly shone brightly. Chapter 23:12. A scarlet light flew out and enveloped Nan Jinshu. A terrifying pressure descended upon him, encircling his entire body and forming a barrier. Clang! A wave of energy repelled Chu Luiyue's star darkness sword. Chu Luiyue was shocked and quickly retreated. However, the star darkness sword couldn't completely avoid the attack. The sword trembled, almost numbing Chu Luiyue's hand. Did the first divine emissary attack? Chu Luiyue frowned. He suppressed the surging aura in his chest and looked at Nan Jinshu. Nan Jinshu was overjoyed. First divine emissary. The seal flew out of his hand and floated in the air. An endless amount of pressure and power spread out from it. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. The seal contained the first divine emissary's aura. No wonder Nan Jinshu was so confident. First divine emissary. Did you see that? This Shangguanyu is extremely bold. Not only did she barge into the illusionary god sea, but she also turned this place upside down. She even forced me to tell her the whereabouts of the third zither score. Nan Jinshu was excited. He felt like he had found a savior and hurriedly told him everything that Chu Luiyue had done. She's so bold and arrogant. She doesn't care about you at all. She doesn't respect the illusionary god palace at all. First divine emissary, you must punish her severely as a warning to others. Nan Jinshu couldn't be blamed for being so angry. After all, a sword was pressed against his neck just a moment ago. His life was hanging by a thread. Now that he finally had a chance to counterattack, he naturally wouldn't let it go. He wanted nothing more than to ask the first divine emissary to kill Chu Luiyue personally. However, in the next moment, a cold and deep voice rang out from the talisman, causing Nanjin Shu to be stunned. Nanjin Shu, what did you say to her just now? Every word was cold and deep, like an interrogation. His tone was filled with undisguised anger. Nanjin Shu was stunned. What did he say just now? No, he told Chu Luiyue about the third score. His entire body was covered in cold sweat. First messenger, I didn't do it on purpose. Shangguan Yu has been forcing me. This matter was extremely confidential, which was why the first divine emissary was willing to meet him and gave him the qualifications to cultivate in the illusionary god Sea. If it was any other day, Nanjin Shu wouldn't have mentioned it so casually. But just now, Chu Luiyue's sword was on his neck. He was angry and scared. In a moment of impulse, he actually blurted it out. He didn't expect the first oracle to know about it. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes when he heard the voice. This voice was very unfamiliar, but the tone, it was strangely familiar. He felt like he had heard it somewhere before. Nanjin Shuxing was afraid that he would be punished. He quickly shifted the blame to Chu Luiyue. First divine emissary, if she hadn't forced me, I wouldn't have said these things. Furthermore, the first two pieces of music are indeed with her. She had broken so many taboos. Just this alone should be enough to punish her, right? However, the first divine emissary didn't seem to listen to Nanjin Shu. Both of you, leave the illusionary god Sea immediately. From now on, you are not allowed to come back. Nanjin Shu was stunned. First divine emissary, what do you mean? He didn't mind. He had made a mistake and should be punished. But, what about Chu Luiyue? First divine emissary, she? Before he could finish his sentence, the first divine emissary's voice came from the talisman again. Nanjin Shu, do you have any objections? His voice was very soft, but it made Nanjin Shu shiver. He hurriedly said, I wouldn't dare. No matter how unhappy he was with this result, he knew that he couldn't show it. Wasn't going against the first divine emissary suicidal? No matter how much Nanjin Shu hated Chu Luiyue and how much he wanted her to die here, he still had a brain. The first divine emissary clearly didn't intend to kill her. Other than chasing her out of the illusionary god Sea, there wasn't any other punishment. Perhaps it was because he was afraid of the two scores? After all, the talisman had already recognized her as its master. It wasn't feasible to take it by force. Nanjin Shu thought about it and felt that this was the only answer. He suppressed the surging emotions in his heart and cupped his fists. Jin Shu will leave now. After that, he gave Chu Luiyue a deep look before heading up to the sea. However, the talisman didn't leave with him. It just hung there quietly. It was only a few steps away from Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue stared at the talisman and suddenly asked, First divine emissary, have we met before? The talisman didn't answer. Several rays of red light swirled around, stirring up waves. Swoosh! The scattered stones finally returned to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue had a thought and put them all back into her universe ring. Then, the talisman quietly dissipated. It transformed into a crimson light that covered everything below. Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed. This red light was exactly the same as the Red Moon Desert. She clenched her fists and finally turned to leave. Splash! The sound of water splashing attracted the attention of the people on the silver bridge. Countless pairs of eyes immediately gathered in that direction. They saw a figure rushing out of the water and heading in their direction. Nanjin Shu? Why is he the one coming out? Isn't he supposed to cultivate in the illusionary god Sea? It hasn't even been a day. Is it over? His expression doesn't look right. After Nanjin Shu came out, he was shocked to see so many people gathered on the silver bridge. Those gazes made him extremely embarrassed. However, he couldn't go back now. He could only brace himself and go forward. Soon, he arrived on the silver bridge as well. The moment his feet touched the ground, he didn't stop and immediately headed toward the heavenly gate above him. There was no expression on his face. He exuded a dangerous and cold aura that kept people at arm's length. Anyone with eyes could see that he was in an extremely bad mood at this moment. The people around him quieted down. However, not everyone was wary of him. For example, Mu Hongyu. She quickly arrived in front of Nan Jinshu and stopped him. Nan Jinshu, where's Lu Yu? Nan Jinshu knew who she was talking about. His expression immediately turned ugly. What does it have to do with me? If you want to know, why don't you go and see for yourself? He hated Chu Luiyue to the core. Even hearing her name made him grit his teeth. Mu Hongyu raised her chin. How troublesome. You're all in the illusionary god sea anyway. What's wrong with me asking? Everything had been fine earlier. However, for some reason, she suddenly couldn't see what was going on below. She was worried. Of course, she had to ask Nan Jinshu about it. Suddenly she narrowed her eyes and asked curiously, Huh? Why is there a sword wound on your neck? Chapter 23:13. It would have been better if Nan Jinshu hadn't mentioned it. In fact, it was only a very shallow wound. The skin was slightly broken and a faint trace of blood seeped out. It would recover in 2 or 3 days. However, it constantly reminded Nan Jinshu of the humiliation he had suffered in front of Chu Luiyue. He raised his hand to touch his neck and snorted coldly. If you don't want any trouble, you'd better leave now. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that there won't be more injuries on your body. He was clearly threatening Nan Jinshu. He couldn't defeat Chu Luiyue, but it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with Mu Hongyu, who was only a high god. However, Mu Hongyu didn't care at all. Mu Hongyu blinked when she saw the man's angry expression. Patriarch Nan, why are you so angry? Could it be that Lu Yu is the one who gave you this injury? Nan Jinshu was even more furious. He waved his hand and formed a sharp blade with his divine power. It went straight for Mu Hongyu. The two of them were only a step away from each other. Even an honorable god of the same level might not be able to dodge his sudden attack in time, let alone a high god. Swish! The sharp blade pierced through Mu Hongyu's chest. The crowd exclaimed. However, the next moment, they saw that Mu Hongyu had disappeared. That was clearly just her afterimage. Nan Jinshu's heart had just been filled with joy when he saw this scene and was taken aback. Then, a hand gently patted his shoulder from behind. Patriarch Nan, you're not strong enough. Nan Jinshu's hair stood on end. He immediately turned around. Mu Hongyu was standing behind him with a smile. How did you? Before he could ask, Mu Hongyu threw a punch. It landed on Nan Jinshu's face. Bang! With a dull thud, Nan Jinshu felt dizzy and stumbled a few steps back, almost falling to the ground. When Mu Hongyu threw this punch, it affected the power of the surrounding space and created a great pressure on Nan Jinshu. That was why he was able to catch Nan Jinshu off guard so easily. Nan Jinshu felt a dull pain all over his face. Something was flowing out from his nose and the corner of his mouth. He wiped it off and looked down. The blood was thick and red. His hands began to tremble slightly. The surrounding onlookers revealed strange expressions when they saw this. What was going on? Wasn't Mu Hongyu a high deity? After exchanging blows with Nan Jinshu, not only was he not injured, but he even managed to beat Nan Jinshu to such a state? Mu Hongyu clicked her tongue and shook her head. Nan family head, you don't seem to be in a good condition. Why do you have to force yourself? I'm just asking you a question. Can't you just answer me honestly? Now, you've added new wounds to your old wounds. Look, what do you want? Nan Jinshu was about to explode from anger. Mu Hongyu. Mu Hongyu touched her ear. Hey, I'm listening. You. At this moment, another figure dashed out of the illusionary god ocean. Shangguan Yu is out. Someone in the crowd exclaimed. Mu Hongyu quickly turned around. When she saw that it was Chu Luiyue, she heaved a sigh of relief and waved happily. Lu Yu. Chu Luiyue was also very fast. He arrived at the silver bridge in the blink of an eye. Mu Hongyu hurried forward and looked Chu Luiyue up and down. Lu Yu, are you all right? Just now, a mysterious and powerful force had suddenly appeared and blocked her perception, causing her to be quite worried. When she saw that Nan Jinshu had returned first and was injured, She was even more worried about what had happened below. Chu Luiyue smiled. I'm fine. Mu Hongyu heaved a sigh of relief after confirming that she was really not injured. That's good, that's good. Chu Luiyue looked up and saw Nanjin Shu covering his nose with blood all over his face. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. What happened to the Nan family master? He had only arrived a little earlier than her. Why was he injured again? Mu Hongyu coughed. I asked him about your situation just now. Not only did he refuse to tell me, but he even wanted to hit me. I had no choice but to retaliate. She sounded quite aggrieved. Everyone was speechless. Nan Jinshu's forehead twitched. This Mu Hongyu was really good at distorting the truth. Upon hearing this, Chu Luiyue's expression turned cold. Nan Jinshu, did you attack Hongyu just now? Nan Jinshu could not deny it. He gritted his teeth and said, So what if I did? But she's not. Before he could say the word injured, Chu Luiyue quickly went forward and harshly kicked Nan Jinshu's chest. Nan Jinshu instinctively wanted to block it. However, he was not as fast as Chu Luiyue. There was a flash of light. Chu Luiyue kicked Nan Jinshu with his long legs and accurately hit him. Bam! Nan Jinshu did not even have time to set up a barrier before he was sent flying. Everyone hurriedly moved aside. Nan Jinshu fell onto the silver bridge with a loud thud. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale. When Chu Luiyue attacked, she specially summoned her divine body. Hence, this attack almost took half of Nan Jinshu's life. Everyone retreated further when they saw that. Chu Luiyue did not hold back. If they continued to fight, it would not be good for them to bleed. No one was worried about Nan Jinshu's condition. On one hand, most of the cultivators in the illusionary god palace were focused on cultivation. Most of them were not close to each other. On the other hand, Nan Jinshu had entered the illusionary god palace immediately after he arrived. He did not have much contact with them, let alone anything else. I didn't attack you just now because you're the first divine envoy. However, that doesn't mean I'm a pushover. Chu Luiyue dusted his clothes and said mildly. Everyone was shocked when they heard that. The first divine envoy. What happened down there that involved the first divine envoy? Next time before you attack, please consider whether you have the ability to do so. Otherwise, if you fail and get beaten up, where will you hide your face in the future? Nan Jinshu was so angry that he could not speak. He spat out a few more mouthfuls of blood. He was already weaker than Chu Luiyue. Now that he was beaten up by Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu, he was even more miserable. Many people looked at each other and secretly exchanged glances. Chu Luiyue's words were really interesting. Nan Jinshu had entered the illusionary god palace immediately, met the first divine envoy, and obtained permission to cultivate in the illusionary god ocean. Everyone thought that the first divine envoy would take good care of him. However, why did Chu Luiyue not seem to be worried about causing trouble for himself after beating up Nan Jinshu? Chapter 23:14. Chu Luiyue then turned to Mu Hongyu. Hongyu, let's go back. Mu Hongyu immediately replied. Okay. Then the two of them really went straight to the divine gate. Mu Hongyu even wrinkled her nose at Nan Jinshu when they walked past him. So that's all there is to a supreme god powerhouse. Although she was only a supreme god now, she had broken through to the initial realization realm. Her combat power was on par with a supreme god powerhouse. Nan Jinshu choked. His vision turned black and he almost fainted from anger. However, the two of them couldn't be bothered with him. They went straight to the divine gate and stepped through it. Their figures quickly disappeared behind the flickering barrier, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people standing in the same place. They really went back? Just like that? Speaking of which, Shangguanyu stayed in the illusionary god ocean for a few hours. How did she come out unscathed? That's not all. She even beat Nanjin Shu up. The first messenger is in charge of the illusionary god ocean. Logically speaking, he should know what happened here, right? Why didn't he punish Shangguanyu? The weird thing is, I thought Nanjin Shu really had the first messenger as his backer. But it seems like that's not the case. If the first messenger really had the intention to support Nanjin Shu, this wouldn't have happened. All sorts of discussions entered Nan Jinshu's ears, making him very frustrated. Of course, he wanted to know why this was happening. Even if he couldn't kill her for the zither score, there were many ways to punish her. But none. Chu Luiyue was so presumptuous and had done so many outrageous things in the illusionary god ocean. The first messenger didn't punish her other than ordering her to stay away from the illusionary god ocean. Nan Jinshu couldn't figure it out. That person wasn't easy to talk to. Otherwise, the other messengers wouldn't be so afraid of him. But this time, it was really strange. Nan Jinshu forced himself to stand up. No matter what, he couldn't stay here any longer. He had to return to the illusionary god palace as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu crossed the barrier and headed towards their residence. Mu Hongyu looked back and asked curiously, "What's the matter? Luyu, did you really leave that wound on Nan Jinshu's neck? You guys actually started fighting under the illusionary god sea?" Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment, then said, "Not really. It was just an exchange of pointers, but they didn't fight. To be precise, she had single-handedly attacked Nan Jinshu. Unfortunately, the first oracle had arrived too quickly and did not have time to ask about the whereabouts of the third score. After that, it would probably be difficult for him to ask again. Fortunately, this trip wasn't completely fruitless." Mu Hongyu nodded in understanding. "That's right. Originally, I was watching the illusionary god see very well. In the end, I don't know why, but it suddenly stopped. It was as if something was blocking it." Chu Luiyue smiled. "Since the first divine envoy has made his move, it will naturally be difficult for you to investigate." Mu Hongyu's almond-shaped eyes widened. Did the first divine envoy really go? Why didn't I see him? He didn't come in person. The seal that Nan Jinshu brought over contained a trace of the first divine envoy's aura. He came out when he sensed what Nan Jinshu and I were doing. I see. I knew that the power was very strong. Mu Hongyu finally figured out this problem and understood a lot more. I've long heard that the first divine envoy is very powerful. It seems like it's true. He only sealed a trace of his aura in the seal, and it was already so powerful that it could easily cover the entire illusionary god sea. It was hard to imagine how powerful he was. That's why I wanted to meet him. Unfortunately, this kind of opportunity is hard to come by. Chu Luiyue was not only amazed by the first oracle's power, but she also wanted to know something. She wanted to know if she had any history with the first oracle. At first, she didn't take it to heart, but later, that familiar feeling lingered in her heart. The strangest thing was that after Nan Jinshu left, she asked if they had met before, but the first oracle didn't answer. He didn't admit it, but he didn't deny it either. Of course, it was also possible that he didn't care to answer Chu Luiyue's question. But for some reason, Chu Luiyue didn't think that was very likely. She raised her head and looked into the distance at the towering illusory god palace. She would go in eventually. Nan Jinshu returned to the illusionary god palace in a fluster. He had just returned to his residence when he saw someone waiting for him at the door. He was shocked. The eighth divine envoy? Why are you here? Xu Jing smiled. I'm here to wait for you. As she spoke, she glanced at Nan Jinshu, but she was not surprised at all. In fact, she had already known about what had happened outside 15 minutes ago. Nan Jinshu was instantly embarrassed and lowered her head subconsciously as she was being scrutinized by her. I wonder why the eighth divine envoy has suddenly come here? Xu Jing didn't answer his question. Instead, she sighed. It seems that Shangguan Yu is more arrogant and despotic than the rumors. Nan Jinshu was furious when he heard this. He let down his guard against Xu Jing. He wiped the blood from the corner of his lips. She has always been like this. Master Nan, didn't you take the first oracle's seal to the illusionary god ocean? Why did Shangguan Yu bully you like this? Is she looking down on you, or does she not care about the first oracle at all? Xu Jing asked purposely. Offending Nan Jinshu wasn't a big deal, but offending the first oracle was a serious crime. She thought that Nan Jinshu would be furious and would complain to the first divine emissary. However, Nan Jinshu's expression changed several times before he finally said, Don't worry, Mississippi. Finally, he said, Eighth divine envoy, did you come here just to tell me this? Xu Jing was stunned. Nan Jinshu's reaction didn't seem right. While she was thinking, Nan Jinshu continued. The first divine envoy has already made his decision. Naturally, we can only listen to him, said the first divine envoy. Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat. She finally realized that the first oracle already knew about this. But the current situation was his choice. The first oracle didn't punish Chu Luiyue. Xu Jing couldn't believe it, but Nan Jinshu didn't want to talk about it anymore. Eighth oracle, if there's nothing else. Of course there is. Xu Jing quickly reacted and suppressed the shock and confusion in her heart. The sixth oracle wants to see Master Nan. Nan Jinshu was stunned. The sixth oracle? Now. Xu Jing nodded and smiled. Master Nan, please follow me. This didn't give Nan Jinshu the right to refuse. Digression. 6 p.m. Chapter 23:15. At this moment, Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu returned to their residence. After the two entered the room together, Chu Luiyue found a pen and paper and drew the spatial layout under the illusionary god C for Mu Hongyu. This was actually very difficult. Under the illusionary god C, countless spaces intertwined and overlapped, and were constantly changing. Even 1/10 of it could not be represented by the drawing on the paper. Fortunately, after the stones rolled out, they each froze a part of the space with the divine realm, which helped Chu Luiyue a lot. In addition, Mu Hongyu stood on the silver bridge and watched for a long time, so she was aware of the situation under the illusionary god C. Therefore she could understand it. After a while, Chu Luiyue finally stopped writing and handed over the map in her hand. Mu Hongyu took it and glanced at it. She was surprised. Lu Yu, how do you know so much? These were all invisible and intangible. Her control of space was not top-notch, so it was reasonable to say that she could not give such a map. Chu Luiyue was about to speak when she saw Chong Wanzhou come to the door with tea in his hand. She smiled and waved. Little Zhou, come in. Chong Wanzhou walked in, came to Chu Luiyue's side, and poured her tea. It was the familiar taste of ginger tea. Chu Luiyue reached for the cup. The temperature was just right. She took a sip, and her lungs instantly warmed up. A unique fragrance with a hint of bitterness gradually diffused. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes comfortably, and her bright eyes almost curved into a crescent moon. Not to mention anything else, Xiao Zhou had always done well in these matters. However, he was now a god. It was really a waste of talent to serve her like this. Chu Luiyue held the tea and said, Little Zhou, don't do these things in the future. Chong Wanzhou froze, and a trace of panic flashed in his eyes. Master thinks I didn't do well? Chu Luiyue hurriedly waved his hand. Of course not. However, with your current status, doing this is really a waste of time and energy. These are only trivial matters. Master's matter is not a trivial matter. Chong Wanzhou pursed his lips and interrupted her, which was rare of him. Chu Luiyue was stunned. She looked up and saw his stubborn face. How stubborn! Chu Luiyue sighed in her heart and could only say, Then. Just pretend I didn't say anything? Chong Wanzhou gently nodded. A few strands of messy golden hair hung down from his forehead, covering the ripples in his eyes. Only his rose petal-like lips, which were slightly raised, revealed some of his emotions. Chu Luiyue helplessly held her forehead and smiled. Forget it. He could do whatever he wanted. Now that he had become a god, he was no longer as easily bullied as before. Chu Luiyue retracted his gaze and looked at Mu Hongyu. Here's what happened. Then, he told Mu Hongyu everything that had happened in the illusory god sea. Mu Hongyu was shocked and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. So, your stones can suppress the space turbulence in the illusory god sea? Chu Luiyue shook his head. Strictly speaking, it's not suppression. At most, it's just temporary. After all, those are the divine realms of the great gods, and their power is limited. She could feel that there was an extremely shocking power in the illusory god sea. It was not something she could resist at the moment. But at that time, this power had not erupted. Mu Hongyu was stunned for a while. Suddenly, she remembered something and asked in a low voice. Then, what if it's the gravestone of the great gods? She knew the origin of the pile of stones. Chu Luiyue had gone to the Godslayer mound and obtained them from the tombs of the great gods. According to Chu Luiyue, there were not only tombs of the great gods, but also of the great gods. Hearing her say this, Chu Luiyue was also dazed. I really didn't think about it before. When she went to the Godslayer mound, her strength was limited, so she only stayed in the tombs of the great gods for a while. As for the area of the great gods, she really didn't go there. Normally, the gravestone of the great god should contain more power, but no one can guarantee that the situation there will be the same as the great god's tombs. Chu Luiyue murmured. Back then, these stones had taken the initiative to follow her, but who could be sure that the same thing would happen a second time? The great gods were much more powerful than the great gods. Mu Hongyu wrinkled her nose. What if? If she could really bring back the gravestone of the great gods, then it wouldn't be a problem for Chu Luiyue to deal with the Mirage God Ocean. Chu Luiyue tapped her hand on the armrest and fell into deep thought. Mu Hongyu's words made sense. After all, she didn't expect these stones to choose to follow her. Maybe she should find some time to go to the Godslayer mound again? Once she succeeded, her battle prowess would rise to the extreme. Chu Luiyue was tempted. The Palace of the Mirage God. Nan Jinshu followed Xu Jing to the residence of the Sixth Oracle. As soon as he entered the courtyard, Nan Jinshu smelled a faint, bitter medicinal fragrance. He felt a little strange. The Sixth Oracle didn't seem to be a celestial physician. Why would there be a medicinal smell here? Xu Jing turned to look at him and said, "The Sixth Oracle came back recently. The Sixth Divine Emissary has just returned from outside and is currently recuperating. You just have to answer whatever he asks later." Nan Jinshu immediately said, "Yes." Only then did Xu Jing step forward and knock on the door. "Sixth Oracle, Patriarch Nan is here." A moment later, a hoarse voice came from inside. "Come in." Xu Jing gestured at Nan Jinshu with his chin. Nan Jinshu was startled and pointed at himself. "I'll go in alone? Won't the Eighth Oracle come with me?" Xu Jing smiled. "The Sixth Oracle wants to talk to Patriarch Nan in private. I won't disturb you." Nan Jinshu was a little nervous, but he nodded and went in. Xu Jing closed the door. Creak. Nan Jinshu felt inexplicably nervous as he listened. He had been here for a while, and this was the first time an oracle wanted to see him. "Nan Jinshu." The voice came from behind the screen. Nan Jinshu cupped his fists and bowed. "Greetings, Sixth Oracle. Are you sure the third music score is in the God-slaying tomb?" Nan Jinshu was stunned. At first, he found it strange that the Sixth Divine Emissary knew about this. However, after thinking about it, he realized that the first Divine Emissary had already sent someone to investigate. He nodded. "Yes. Did you tell Shangguan Yu about this?" "Of course not," Nan Jinshu said hurriedly. "This is a serious matter. How would I dare to tell her about it?" "That's good. As long as you know what you're doing. Besides, I heard that she went to the illusionary god Ocean without permission." "Yes. This woman is very daring. Did the first oracle know about this?" Chapter 23:16. Nan Jinshu paused and said hesitantly, "This counts, but it doesn't. At that time, I brought the seal of the first divine envoy to the illusionary god Sea. When I clashed with Shangguan Yu, the aura of the first divine envoy gushed out from the seal and chased us out of the illusionary god Sea." "The first oracle didn't show up?" "No." Nan Jinshu was puzzled. "The first oracle is in charge of the illusionary god Sea. Even if he doesn't show up personally, he can easily find out everything that happens in the illusionary god Sea. Besides, such a small matter shouldn't require the first oracle to make a move, right? Actually, this matter might be a big deal to him and Chu Luiyue, but it was definitely nothing to the first oracle. The illusionary god Sea was boundless and vast. At most, the two of them were just messing around. Why would the first oracle make a special trip for this matter? Just the seal alone was enough to solve the problem. When you went to meet the first oracle, did you see him in person?" the sixth oracle suddenly asked. Nan Jinshu hesitated. No. Outsiders thought that he had entered the courtyard and must have seen the first oracle. But in reality, he had just stood outside the door and said a few words. He didn't even see that person's shadow. He didn't dare to hide anything in front of the sixth oracle. As expected. The sixth oracle murmured as if he had expected this, but he also seemed a little unwilling. Nan Jinshu almost thought that he was hallucinating. Why did it sound like the sixth oracle wanted the first oracle to appear personally? And he seemed to have expected that the first oracle wouldn't meet him? You said that the first oracle came out to stop the two of you as soon as the conflict broke out? Yes. Nan Jinshu described the situation at that time. Of course he added some details, but he didn't know that Mo Shurqian was completely uninterested behind the screen. What he wanted to know was the first oracle's attitude towards Chu Luiwei. What kind of place is the illusionary god sea? In the past 10,000 years, 90% of the cultivators who trespassed there died and were buried at the bottom of the sea. As for the remaining 10%, even if they were lucky enough to escape, they would inevitably be severely punished. Even if they didn't die, they would be half dead. However, when it comes to her, it's different. He sneered coldly with a hint of mockery. Nan Jinshu felt a little uncomfortable when he heard this voice. But at this time, he didn't have time to think about this. His focus was the same as the sixth divine envoys. Sixth divine envoy. Do you also find this matter strange? I originally thought that the first god's emissary wouldn't let Shangguanyu off the hook so easily. But who would have thought that he wouldn't be punished at all? What do you think the first oracle is thinking? Humph. The thoughts of the first divine envoy are not something that we can guess. This? Nan Jinshu frowned. He could hear that the sixth divine emissary seemed to be very concerned about this matter, but perhaps because he was afraid, he did not continue to speak. All right, you can go back. Nan Jinshu was at a loss when the sixth divine emissary suddenly asked him to leave. Was he letting him go just like that? Could it be that the sixth emissary had asked him to come here just to ask about this? But, the sixth divine envoy. Get out. That voice carried an unquestionable pressure. Nan Jinshu's heart skipped a beat. He didn't dare to ask any more questions and quickly retreated. Mu Hongyu left with the map that Chu Luiwei had drawn. She still needed to go back and take a closer look at the situation below the illusionary god ocean. Also, she had to break through to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible. After Mu Hongyu left, Chu Luiwei asked Xiao Zhou to leave as well. She sat alone in her room to think. Now, there were a lot of things that she needed to solve. She hadn't finished her star path yet. This was the fastest and most suitable way for her to enter the illusionary god palace openly. Su Li had been in the illusionary god palace for a while, and would carefully investigate the situation from time to time. But after all, she was under the watchful eyes of the god's emissaries. There were many things that Su Li did not dare to go overboard with, so the information that she could find was limited. Until now, there were still no clues as to the whereabouts of Dugu Ma Bao and Lan Xiao. Chu Luiwei could basically conclude that the two of them were trapped in an extremely secretive location in the illusionary god palace. It would be impossible to rely on Su Li alone to find them. She still had to go in. At the same time, the third Guqin score was also very important to her. She had to think of a way to get information from Nan Jinshu. If she guessed correctly, the third Guqin score was still in the Divine Ruins world. And the two gods' emissaries, Jiolong and Shiyan, who had left earlier, were probably looking for the last Guqin score. Unfortunately, the two of them had already disappeared without a trace, leaving no clues behind. And Diwu Zhangzi, who was trapped in the illusionary god ocean. What kind of person was the first god's emissary? You are. A low and pleasant voice sounded. Chu Luiwei turned around and saw Rongxiu walking in. He came in front of Chu Luiwei. Seeing her frown, he reached out and smoothed her brows. What are you thinking about? Why are you so tired? Chu Luiwei held his hand and rubbed her face against the back of his hand. It's still those. Rongxiu smiled and hugged her. He leaned over and kissed her hair. Tell me about it. Miss Shangguan. I have something to do. Zhao, who had just walked to the door, was originally smiling. But when he saw the cold and noble figure hugging Chu Luiwei in the room, he was shocked and stunned. Why was she here? Chapter 23:17. The most important thing was that he seemed to have come at the wrong time. When the two people in the room heard the voice, they both looked outside the door. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. This is... Ming's heart trembled violently. He originally wanted to run away, but it was obviously too late now. If he wanted to go in, he really couldn't move his legs. Chu Luiyue raised the corners of his lips slightly. Lord Ming, why are you here? Please come in. He didn't dare to disobey Madam's orders. Silently holding his breath, he walked stiffly and braced himself to enter the house. Chu Luiyue stood up. Rong Xiu, let me introduce you. This is Lord Ming of Zhanbao Pavilion. He usually treats me very well and has helped me a lot before. Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curled into a smile. I see. Lord Ming, I've heard a lot about you. Ming Shu's legs went soft. He barely restrained his urge to kneel down and bow. He forced a smile. You flatter me. I've heard a lot about you too. Ha! Rong Xiu laughed. Since Lord Ming has taken good care of you, as her husband, I naturally have to thank you properly. Ming Shu repeatedly said that he didn't dare. But, it's just a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. At this moment, he was extremely grateful to the second master. If it weren't for that person's reminder, he wouldn't know when he had offended Madam. How could he stand in front of this person and talk to him like this? Chu Luiyue raised his hand. Lord Ming, please sit down. You can talk slowly. How could Ming Shu dare to sit down? He coughed, waved his hand and said, No need, no need. I'm here today because I have something to tell you. I'll leave after that. Chu Luiyue looked at Ming Shu and felt that he was a little strange today. He seemed very nervous. It must be a big matter for you to personally solve the case. Please speak. Ming Shu tried his best to make himself look as calm and composed as he usually did. He said, It's like this. I came here this time to ask you if you've been in contact with Mu Yafeng recently. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Mu Yafeng? No, why? You frowned. Actually, it's nothing much. It's just that Mu Yafeng has continued to walk the star path since yesterday. Furthermore, in a short span of one day, he had broken through 3 great Grandmaster Xian formations. I thought it was a little strange, so I thought I'd come over to ask you. Lord Ji thinks that I revealed the contents of the mythical flame diagram to her? Chu Luiyue immediately understood. Please don't misunderstand. Zhao hurriedly explained, I just feel that this matter is really strange, so I wanted to ask you for confirmation. After all, those Xian formations were extremely difficult to decipher. Previously, she didn't make any progress for such a long time, but now she's suddenly improved by leaps and bounds. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. What Lord Ji said makes sense. Previously, Senior Xiao Ran had also said that he had spent several years on those great Grandmaster-level profound formations before he had barely comprehended them. Originally, according to his speculation, Mu Yafeng should also need a long time to decipher this Xian formation. Previously, she was busy with the illusory god Si, so she didn't know that Mu Yafeng had made a move again. Now that she heard it, she also felt that it was very strange. The mythical flame diagram is a treasure of Treasure Pavilion. When I agreed to help copy it, I already knew the rules. I would never easily reveal it to outsiders. I didn't even reveal it to my subordinates. Lord Ming Shu, you can rest assured about this. You hurriedly said, Of course I believe in your character. I have no intention of doubting you. Heavens! He was really just curious, so he came over to ask. Who knew that he would bump into this person? Wasn't this suspecting that there was something wrong with Madam? Even if he was given 10 more guts, he wouldn't dare to do this. If he had known that this person was here, he would never have stepped into this courtyard. Chu Luiyue smiled. I know that Lord Yu has no ill intentions. Actually, it's not just you. I also feel that it's a little strange. Mu Yafeng's talent is not bad, but with her own strength, it is indeed impossible for her to decipher 3 Grandmaster Xian formations in such a short time. Chu Luiyue's words were tactful. In fact, it should be said that it was absolutely impossible. If she had this ability, she wouldn't have dragged her feet on the star passage for so many years. In the eyes of many people in the illusory god palace, Mu Yafeng was already a rare genius. But in Chu Luiyue's opinion, but it was fine. Ming Shu heaved a sigh of relief and said, Not only that. She hasn't finished yet. She's still on the star passage. When I came here just now, I passed by and took a few glances. There was a bit of an irresistible force. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. You mean, she plans to directly finish the star passage and enter the illusory god palace? Mingshu paused. It's hard to say, but if her performance is still like this, then it might really work. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. In fact, she didn't care much about Mu Yafeng. But this matter was really strange. Otherwise, she wouldn't have made a special trip. I'm here today mainly to talk about this matter. It's up to you how you think. Mingshu said. Chu Luiyue nodded. Thank you for reminding me, Lord Yu. Mingshu waved his hand. Then, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. There are still some things to deal with in the treasure pavilion. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue didn't ask him to stay. I'll send you off. No need, no need. I took the liberty to disturb the two of you. I'll leave now. How dare he really let the two of them send him off? As he spoke, he walked outside. Take care, Lord Yu. Rongxiu said lightly. Mingshu staggered, but a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. He steadied himself and looked up. Suddenly, the corner of his eyes twitched. Yan Qing stood with his sword in his arms. There was no expression on his handsome and cold face. He just looked at him quietly. Yu quickly swallowed the rest of his words, nodded slightly, and hurried away. For some reason, his footsteps became faster. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had already opened the gate of the courtyard and slipped away. In such a hurry. Chu Luiyue looked at Yu's back and muttered in a low voice. The person he just mentioned, is she the one who asked you for the mythical flame diagram? Rongxiu tilted his head and asked. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. That's her. However, based on my understanding of her, she shouldn't be able to do such a thing. Even if she went back to cultivate in seclusion for a while, she shouldn't have advanced by leaps and bounds. The seventh oracle values her very much. I don't know if she went to consult him. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly and said lightly. The seventh oracle really doesn't have good taste. Chapter 23:18. His tone was light and indifferent, extremely natural. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, wrinkled her nose, and smiled. There aren't many people who dare to say that the seventh divine emissary has no foresight. The divine emissaries had a very high status in the illusory god palace. Many people would be extra careful when talking about them, let alone such a straightforward judgment. Rongxiu bent his finger and lightly scratched her nose. Am I wrong? He's a Shen master himself. It's impossible that he can't see my Yuer's talent. Chu Luiyue shrugged and sighed. Isn't it because you don't have a bloodline totem? From the first day she came here, she deeply understood how much contempt and ridicule she would face without a bloodline totem. Rongxiu's eyes narrowed slightly as his finger lightly brushed across her forehead. Chu Luiyue's heart moved. She leaned closer and whispered. Rongxiu, the infinite divine dial, can only test people with bloodline power? Rongxiu looked at her. After a moment he said, Of course. Bang! A stream of light flew up and quickly bloomed into an extremely brilliant Shen formation. Mu Yafeng looked up with unconcealable excitement in her eyes. The fourth one. This was already the fourth Shen formation she had cracked in a row on the Star Road this time. And it only took her less than 2 days. Not far behind her, many people were watching. Seeing that she had successfully cracked another Shen formation, the crowd instantly became restless. What's wrong with Mu Yafeng? Why did she suddenly become so powerful? The further she goes, the more complicated the Shen formation is. I remember that she was trapped in a Shen formation for a long time and couldn't crack it in the end, so she had no choice but to give up. How long has it been? She's back again and her progress is so smooth. Her talent has always been outstanding. Maybe she suddenly had an epiphany. If this continues, she can really comprehend all the Shen formations and officially enter the illusory god palace, right? I thought it would be Shangguan Yu. Haha, what a joke. Shangguan Yu is very powerful, but she doesn't have a bloodline totem. It won't be her turn, right? That's true. But other than that, she's really powerful. Didn't you guys hear that she went to the illusory god ocean and came back safe and sound? She even beat Nanjing Shu. If she didn't have the confidence, would she dare to do that? Mu Yafeng was in a good mood when she heard the envy and admiration of the people in front of her. However, the name that appeared later caused her eyes to turn cold. It was just because he had some talent that he dared to act so recklessly. I heard she was because she made demands of herself as the second divine emissary of God to the illusory god. She is really arrogant. The second oracle could tolerate her once or twice, but it was hard to say what would happen if she did it too many times. Mu Yafeng shook her head, dispelled the messy thoughts in her mind, and continued forward. This time, no matter what, she had to complete the star path and enter the illusory god palace. In the courtyard, Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue sat facing each other. A translucent chessboard floated between them. On it, the two chess pieces were fighting fiercely. Chu Luiyue stared at the chessboard and rubbed her chin. Ever since she read the mythical flame diagram and officially broke through to the great Grandmaster realm, her Xian formation cultivation had improved greatly. But after fighting with Rong Xiu, she felt a deep sense of defeat. Now, no matter where she went, there was no way to reverse the situation. She was at the mercy of others. Master, there. Go there. An anxious voice came from behind her. Chu Luiyue looked back helplessly. Little Hachi, how many times have I told you not to speak while watching the game? Can't you just paint your nails in peace? Little Hachi pursed her red lips and waved her hand. How can I be at ease when Master can't win? Look, it's all messed up. Chu Luiyue, are you complaining that your master is not good enough? Little Hachi narrowed her eyes and quickly smiled. Of course not. I'm doing this for your own good. Look, you've played with His Highness for so many years, but you've only won a few times. Chu Luiyue, I remember this clearly. I really don't need you to remind me. She raised her chin. You want me to go there? Little Hachi's eyes lit up. Yes. Then watch carefully. Swoosh. Chu Luiyue flicked her finger, and a piece condensed from divine power flew out and landed on the spot Little Hachi pointed out. Rong Xiu's eyes were calm as he placed a piece. It was as if a sword had slashed down and completely sealed Chu Luiyue's last path. Chu Luiyue spread her hands. Did you see it clearly? If we do as you say, it will only make your master die faster. Little Hachi shrank her neck guiltily. Ahem, master. I haven't been learning for long. Of course, I can't compare with you and His Highness. I promise I won't say anything next time. Chu Luiyue said. You said the same thing last time and the time before that. Little Hachi pursed her lips and made a sewing gesture. Chu Luiyue gently knocked her forehead. You won't remember it anyway. She was used to it. Little Hachi's eyes were filled with tears. She really wanted to help her master win. At this moment, Shijing walked in from outside. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Shijing, where did you go? She didn't see Shijing after returning from the illusionary god sea. Roy bowed to them one by one before explaining. Master, I went to the thunder pool. Chu Luiyue was slightly stunned. Isn't the thunder pool sealed? Now, there shouldn't be anyone in the illusionary god palace going there. Shijing chuckled. Yes, but I just went to the shore to take a look. I didn't do anything else. Chu Luiyue laughed. All the Tianlei in the thunder pool have been frozen. What's there to see? Shijing said. Nothing. Master, there are a lot of Tianlei in the thunder pool. The second oracle and the others only sealed the upper layer, but the lower ones are still fine. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Oh, how do you know? This matter was extremely confidential and hidden. Ordinary people definitely wouldn't be able to guess. Shijing paused. Just guessed. The Tianlei power below is still wandering around. If you stand close and take a closer look, you can see it. Chu Luiyue looked at him meaningfully. Shijing. Sigh. You. Chu Luiyue was about to speak when Cini suddenly pushed open the door and came out. Master. Seeing that his expression was different from before, Chu Luiyue knew that something must have happened, so she immediately asked, What's wrong? Cini came to her. Chi Han sent a message saying that they met Jiu Long and Shi Yan in the god-slaying tomb. What? Chu Luiyue was shocked and stood up. Because she was too shocked, she didn't notice that Cini didn't call the two oracles but directly called them by their names. Chapter 23:19. God-slaying tomb. What are they doing there? Chu Luiyue had thought of many places, but she had never thought of the god-slaying tomb. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Could it be that the last Guqin score was in the god-slaying tomb? But that couldn't be right. Back then, she had finally gotten the second Guqin score from Senior Ah Jing in the god-slaying tomb. If the third one was there, how could he not know? Her brows were tightly knitted together. Rong Xiu asked, "Did you just get the news?" Sin Yi nodded. He could contact everyone in the 13U. After getting the news, he immediately came to Chu Luiyue. Of course, he knew how important the last Guqin score was to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment and suddenly thought of a question. Why is Qi Han in the god-slaying tomb? You just said them. Who else is with him? Sin Yi said, and Old Six. It seems that they went there to help Old Six break through. But they didn't expect to run into those two. Chu Luiyue froze. Qi Han and the others haven't seen Jiu Long and Old Six. How would they know who they are? Sin Yi explained. They haven't seen those two, but they know that you're in the Illusion God Palace and know a thing or two about this place. Besides, those two are above the god level. Even if they don't know who they are, once they use their strength, it's hard to imagine. That's true. This made sense. Rong Xiu's eyes fell on Chu Luiyue. What's your plan, you? Chu Luiyue was silent for a long time before she finally took a deep breath. To the god-slaying tomb. To go to the god-slaying tomb, they had to leave the heavenly gate. Not to mention Jin Yunlai. Even Chu Luiyue felt that this trip was too troublesome. But they still had to go. For the sake of convenience, this time, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu went together, and no one else was brought. When the two of them arrived at the gate of heaven, there was no one there. In fact, most of the time, this place was empty. Who would come to the heavenly gates to play? Wasn't that just looking for trouble for himself? Last time, it was because of Nan Jinshu's incident that caused such a huge commotion. However, now that Nan Jinshu had returned to the palace of the illusory god and was staying there obediently, there was no need to mention the others. Looking at the barrier in front of him, Chu Luiyue didn't hesitate. He raised his hand and pressed it. Buzz! A ripple spread out. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at Rong Xiu. The seventh divine envoy is in charge of the gate of heaven. If there is any movement here, he will immediately rush over. You didn't see him last time, so you can meet him this time. Rong Xiu smiled. Sure. The palace of the illusory god. Jin Yunlai sensed the familiar aura at the gate of heaven. His forehead twitched violently, and with a crack, he broke the brush in his hand. It's her again. This Chu Luiyue, is there no end to it? Last time, he said he was going to invite the weapon refining saint. Last time, he said he was going to see Nan Jinshu. What is it this time? Jin Yunlai didn't want to pay attention to him, but the gate of heaven was constantly moving. Chu Luiyue was determined to go out. After a while, Jin Yunlai finally couldn't help but stand up. However, before he could walk out, a voice suddenly came from afar. Jin Yunlai. Jin Yunlai was shocked when he heard the voice. The first divine envoy? Then, an illusory figure gradually appeared in front of him. However, the figure was shrouded in a layer of faint light, making it difficult to see his facial features. He could only barely make out a silhouette. Even so, Jin Yunlai recognized at a glance that it was indeed the first divine envoy. He took a quick glance and immediately looked away. He bowed his head and said respectfully, "Greetings, first divine envoy. May I know why the first divine envoy is here today?" Due to nervousness, Jin Yunlai's body was a little stiff. Ever since the first divine envoy went into seclusion, he had never stepped out of the courtyard. Although he did not appear with his true body and was only a strand of his aura, this was the first time he had done so. "Don't you know why I'm here?" The voice was low and indifferent, but it carried an invisible pressure. Jin Yunlai's chest tightened. He frowned and quickly searched his mind. Recently, he didn't seem to have done anything. Why did the first divine envoy sound like he was scolding him? Please enlighten me, first divine envoy. Bas. There was movement at the gate of heaven again. Jin Yunlai subconsciously turned his head to look. The first divine envoy had already made his move. Whoosh! A red stream of light flew out quickly and went straight to the gate of heaven. Jin Yunlai was shocked. The first divine envoy made his move personally. The Xian formations on the star passage can only be comprehended by oneself. Otherwise, it will be regarded as cheating. Then Mu Yafeng. What's going on? Do you want me to continue asking? Jin Yunlai's heart sank. The crimson streak of light flashed through the air at high speed. It arrived at the gate of heaven in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiyue heard the movement and looked up. He felt a little strange. This is the first divine envoy's aura? Noticing this, a look of shock flashed across her eyes. Then, the red stream of light landed on the barrier. The enchantment quietly opened. Chu Luiyue was stunned. After waiting for a while, Jin Yunlai didn't arrive. Instead, the first divine envoy made his move? What does he mean by this? Chu Luiyue couldn't figure it out for a moment. Warning? Reprimand? Rongxiu smiled faintly. Maybe the seventh divine envoy is busy. Digression. Very good. Someone in the comments section guessed part of the truth. 6 o'clock. Chapter 23:20. When Jin Yunlai did not show up, Chu Luiyue did not pay much attention to it. However, when the first god emissary suddenly made a move, she was very surprised. Could it be that he finally decided to come out of seclusion? But something like opening the gate of heaven, it seemed that no matter what, it was not his turn to do it. Rongxiu held her hand. There's no time to lose. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and gently nodded. The two figures quickly disappeared outside the gate of heaven. After a while, the barrier reassembled and was very calm. Chu Luiyue's departure did not attract the attention of the people in the illusory god palace. On one hand, many people's attention was on Mu Yafeng. On the other hand, the movement in the gate of heaven was too small. From the beginning to the end, only a short period of time had passed. Only the divine envoys who were guarding the various locations raised their heads in astonishment when they sensed this fluctuation. The first god emissary made a move. More importantly, he seemed to be at Jin Yunlai's residence. In an instant, several god emissaries immediately moved out and headed towards Jin Yunlai's direction. The first god emissary had been in seclusion for several years. Now that he finally made a move, they naturally had to go and check it out. Illusory God Palace. There was dead silence in the huge room. Jin Yunlai stood there with her fists clenched. Most of her strength seemed to have been sucked out of her body. Even opening her mouth to speak was difficult. Her face was pale and her lips trembled slightly. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Every word of the first god emissary's questioning was heavy and cold. After a long time, she finally found her voice. I just gave her a little reminder. A little reminder? The first god emissary asked. Jin Yunlai closed her eyes and finally said dejectedly, Yes. I intentionally helped her. The gate of heaven will only open for a year. If she is unable to comprehend all the Xian formations on the star path before the deadline and enter the illusory god palace to ascend to the heavens, then she will have to wait for another 10,000 years. A few months have already passed and she is still trapped in those Xian formations. I just feel that her talent is not bad. It is a pity to wait so long. Who in the illusory god palace didn't wait like this? The first oracle let out a rare laugh as if he had heard a joke. Xiao Ran has already been stuck in the last few profound formations for 30,000 years, but I don't see you helping him. Jin Yunlai could hear the dissatisfaction in the first oracle's words. But Xiao Ran was Xiao Ran after all, and Mu Yafeng was different. First divine envoy, ever since I took control of the star path, no one has successfully walked through the star path and entered the illusory shrine. This period of time was truly too long. Many mystic cultivators had already lost their confidence, and fewer people were even trying. If this continues, that's because they don't have the qualifications to enter the illusory god palace. Back then, didn't you successfully complete the star path and even become the seventh divine envoy? Jin Yunlai looked troubled. But back then, it was because Jin Yunlai felt a chill in her heart when she sensed a cold gaze on her. She immediately swallowed the rest of her words. After a long while he said, This is Yunlai's fault. Yunlai will accept any punishment given by the first oracle. But there are some things that I have to say. Mu Yafeng is the most talented mystic cultivator in the illusory god palace in the past 10,000 years. If even she can't do it, then there's no need to talk about the others. If I have to choose to help someone ascend to the heavens and become a god, I will still choose her. You also understand the situation of the profound formations on the star path. The further you go, the more difficult it is. If you don't have enough talent and strength, even if someone gives you pointers, it's still useless. I admit that I helped Mu Yafeng, but she was able to succeed because of her own reasons. Besides, strictly speaking, I did give her some pointers, which may not even be as detailed as the annotations on the mythical flame diagram. If Shangguan Yu can read the mythical flame diagram, why can't Mu Yafeng? In the beginning, he actually didn't have this idea. On one hand, it was because he thought highly of Mu Yafeng and always felt that these problems weren't difficult for her. On the other hand, he didn't have such plans before. But as time passed, the development of the situation gradually deviated from his expectations. On Mu Yafeng's side, she was unable to crack the profound formation and was trapped in one place for a long time without any intention of continuing. On the other hand, Chu Luiwei continuously advanced with the help of the mythical flame diagram and successfully stepped into the area of the Grand Master's profound formation. If this continued, Chu Luiwei might really surpass Mu Yafeng. That wasn't the result that Jin Yunlai wanted to see. Because she didn't have a bloodline totem, Jin Yunlai was biased against Chu Luiwei from the beginning, and always felt that she would leave the illusory god palace soon. Who knew that not only did she not leave, but she also caused a lot of trouble and became the focus of the illusory god palace. If she really took the lead, not only would Mu Yafeng be unhappy, but Jin Yunlai would also feel like she was slapped in the face. Even if Chu Luiwei couldn't ascend to the heavens and become a god, as long as she performed better than Mu Yafeng, it was inevitable that everyone would talk about her. And Jin Yunlai, who was in charge of the star path, would naturally be implicated. What would happen in the end? Everyone would see that Mu Yafeng, who he had always thought highly of, was actually not that outstanding at all. Instead, it was Chu Luiwei, who had been despised and ridiculed from the beginning, who easily crushed her in all aspects. Thinking of this scene, Jin Yunlai felt that it was hard to accept. So when Mu Yafeng came to beg him, he thought about it again and agreed. And her performance did not disappoint him. He thought that everything would go smoothly. But who knew that this matter would alarm the first divine emissary? The first divine emissary listened quietly for a long time before asking, "Are you done?" Jin Yunlai let out a long breath. "I'm done. It seems that you still think that you did nothing wrong." The first divine emissary's voice was faint with a trace of indifference. "Jin Yunlai, I always thought that you were very smart, but now it seems that you are ridiculously stupid. Until now, can't you see that Zhanbao Pavilion took the initiative to give the mythical flame diagram to Shangguan Yu?" Jin Yunlai was shocked and suddenly looked up. "What? Zhanbao Pavilion giving it to Shangguan Yu and you helping Mu Yafeng don't seem to be the same nature, right?" Chapter 23-21. Jin Yunlai stood there in a daze for a long time. His mind was in a mess, and his whole body was in a mess. Zhanbao Pavilion took the initiative to give it to her? Didn't this mean that? He suddenly thought of something and sucked in a breath of cold air. A look of horror flashed across his eyes. First Oracle, only now did he realize what he had done wrong. Now, he had no time to think about why Zhanbao Pavilion did this. He only knew that this time if he was not careful, he would lose himself. "I'll go and take back the Xian formation diagrams that I gave to Mu Yafeng." The first oracle suddenly asked. "You gave her the method to break all the Xian formations?" Jin Yunlai swallowed his saliva with difficulty, but his throat was still tight. In the eyes of the first oracle, this reaction naturally meant that he admitted it. "That's right. Since you've made up your mind to help, of course, you have to help until the end." The first oracle's voice was emotionless. This made Jin Yunlai even more flustered. "Just as well. Open your eyes wide and take a good look. See if Mu Yafeng can ascend to the heavens and become a god with your help." Jin Yunlai felt suffocated and uncomfortable. He wanted to defend himself, but he couldn't say a word. Knock knock. Suddenly, There was a knock on the door. "First Oracle, are you there?" This was Xu Jing's voice. She did not go to Herb Mountain today, so when she heard the commotion, she hurried over. She was the first to arrive. Jin Yunlai was about to speak when he saw the phantom in front of him suddenly disappear. He wanted to ask her to stay, but she had already disappeared. It was just the aura of the first oracle. He could come and go as he pleased. He took a deep breath and rubbed his face hard. After being the seventh oracle for so many years, he had always been cautious. This time, he was impulsive and went easy on Mu Yafeng. He did not expect that he would be caught red-handed by the first oracle. Although the first oracle did not give him any substantial punishment, this made him even more nervous. He really could not understand what that person was thinking. Was he planning to come out of seclusion? If that was the case, there was nothing wrong with it. But the crux of the matter was, with so many things happening in the illusory god palace recently, why did that person target him? Helping Mu Yafeng cheat was neither a big deal nor a small matter. No matter what, it couldn't be more important than the Lightning Pond and Fengming Mountain, right? First Oracle? Xu Jing waited for a while, but he still didn't hear any movement inside, so he shouted again. Creak. The door was opened. Jin Yunlai appeared behind the door. When Xu Jing saw him, he subconsciously looked inside. The first oracle has already left. Jin Yunlai said coldly. That person really came? Xu Jing looked shocked. He's willing to come out of seclusion? That's not right. Why is he looking for you the moment he comes out? Jin Yunlai didn't want to talk too much with her, so she just said perfunctorily, the first divine emissary did not come personally. He only sent a wisp of his aura to ask me some questions. Xu Jing's expression softened a little, but he still felt quite surprised. What's the matter that actually alarmed the first oracle? Jin Yunlai glanced at her. You came here to ask about this? Then you can leave. After saying that, he closed the door again. Bang! Xu Jing didn't expect his actions to be so swift and straightforward. She was so shocked that she took half a step back. When she came back to her senses, she was immediately angry. Didn't she come to ask because she was too surprised that the first oracle had come out of seclusion? What kind of attitude was this? If it weren't for the fact that Jin Yunlai's status was slightly higher than hers, she would definitely not let it go so easily. Xu Jing tidied her clothes and turned to leave. After taking a few steps, she suddenly thought of something and turned back to look at the tightly shut door. Just now. Jin Yunlai's expression was particularly ugly. Did something happen between him and the first oracle? She thought for a moment and raised her voice. Seventh oracle, I heard that Mu Yafeng has already cracked 6 great Grandmaster Shen formations in a row. Aren't you going to take a look? Bang! Jin Yunlai suddenly smashed something. Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat. What was wrong with him? Wasn't Mu Yafeng someone he particularly valued? Now that she had an outstanding performance, why was he still so angry? Xu Jing had a bad feeling. She gritted her teeth and finally turned to leave. After that, a few more oracles came to find out what was going on, but they were all sent away by Jin Yunlai with a few words. When Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao left the illusory god palace and crossed the Blue and Black Sea, she deliberately slowed down. Unfortunately, nothing out of the ordinary happened. After that, the two quickly rushed to the god-slaying mound. Because it wasn't their first time there, and because their strength had improved greatly, it only took them a short time to get there. At noon the next day, the two successfully arrived again. After passing through the forest, they officially entered the god-slaying mound. Looking from afar, it was vast and barren, bleak and cold. It was no different from before. It was just that the inexplicable coldness and pressure seemed to be stronger than before. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. It had been a long time since they had been here, and the god-slaying mound seemed to have some subtle changes. They should already be inside. Rong Xiao looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes. Chu Luiyue nodded. Then the two walked forward hand in hand. At this time, deep in the god-slaying mound, Qi Han was holding a long sword and staring at the two in front of him vigilantly. Behind him sat a young man covered in blood. It was Lu Feng. Zhou Long laughed. You want to enter here with just the two of you? Chapter 23-22. In front of them was a large area of broken tombstones. A desolate and sorrowful aura slowly spread out. This was the tomb of the honored god. Chi Han and Lu Feng had been in the god-slaying mound for some time. They had spent a lot of time and effort to get here. They did not expect Jiu Long and Shi Yan to arrive at this time. As soon as they arrived, they ordered everyone to leave without hesitation. Most of the cultivators in the god-slaying mound had been forced to leave. Of course, not everyone was willing to do so. However, these two were too powerful. Even honored gods could not last more than 3 moves against them. Everyone had no choice but to obey. Jiu Long and Shi Yan had entered from the edge of the god-slaying mound, so they were the last to arrive here. They met Chi Han and Lu Feng, who were waiting outside the tomb. The aura of the tomb of the honored god had changed slightly with the passage of time. To ensure their safety, the two decided to wait here until the aura was at its weakest before going in. When Jiu Long and Shi Yan arrived, Chi Han and Lu Feng had already waited here for 3 days. As expected, they were also chased away. But they did not agree. After a short stalemate, Jiu Long and Lu Feng attacked. After a few rounds, Lu Feng was injured and defeated. Chi Han held his sword in front of Lu Feng to guard against Jiu Long's next move. Of course, Jiu Long didn't take his actions seriously at all. They were just 2 exalted gods. What was there to care about? Jiu Long looked down at the 2 of them. My patience is limited. I can't be bothered to continue arguing with you. I'll count to 3. If you don't leave by then, don't blame me for being merciless. Chi Han said coldly. The god-slaying mound is not anyone's private territory. Every cultivator in the world comes here. You want everyone to leave? That's too unreasonable. 1. Jiu Long raised 1 finger. Obviously, he did not care about Chi Han and Lu Feng. He could not be bothered to continue arguing with them. After all, he had already given them the warning he needed. If they insisted on not listening, there was nothing he could do. Lu Feng coughed and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He twitched his lips without a smile. Chi Han, there's no need to say so much to them. If they were reasonable, they would not do such a thing. Shi Yan glanced at the 2 of them and said slowly, That's right. Reason? Don't you know that in this world, strength is the only thing that matters? 2. Jiu Long raised her eyebrows. These 2 people were really not afraid of death. Unfortunately, perseverance without strength was ignorant stubbornness. Not only was it meaningless, it would even bring him a lot of trouble. The first messenger only said that the 2 of them were to come and find the last piece of music, but he did not say where it was. The god-slaying tomb was huge. Even if the 2 of them worked together, it would still take a lot of effort to find it. Because they were worried that someone would find the music score before them, the first thing they did when they arrived was to drive everyone out. Better to be safe than sorry. Although this would be troublesome, it would avoid some risks. Overall, it was worth it. Most of the people he had met before were quite obedient, or rather sensible. After seeing that Jiu Long and Shi Yan's strength far exceeded theirs, they all gave up and retreated. Only these 2 were stubborn. 3. Jiu Long shouted the last count, shook his head, and raised his hand. It's your honor to die in my hands. He did not want to dirty his hands with the blood of the exalted gods. Unfortunately, these 2 were not smart enough. Vigorous divine power quickly gathered in Jiu Long's palm and transformed into a long sword. The long sword was bright and sharp, and it was covered with a thin layer of frost. Under the sunlight, it shone with a cold light. Then, he raised the sword and slashed down. The sword fell silently, but wherever it passed, space was quickly cut open and then collapsed. Large swathes of black spatial cracks appeared, and violent energy surged out from them. Chi Han gripped his sword even tighter. Just as he was about to attack, he realized that he could not move at all. The powerful aura suddenly descended, and he could not retaliate at all. Jiu Long's sword fell from the sky and was about to kill Chi Han and Lu Feng. A bloody wound suddenly appeared between Chi Han's eyebrows. That was an extremely sharp sword energy, and it easily broke through his defense. Jiu Long's eyes were indifferent. Die! That sword flew toward Chi Han at an even faster speed. However, right at this moment, a sharp sound of air being torn apart suddenly came from afar. Swoosh! Then, a bright golden and greenish-black sword light flew from the sky, piercing through the clouds and wind. Clang. Swish. That sword light and Jiu Long's long sword collided, and then quickly flew up and slashed across. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere. Jiu Long's sword was sent flying just like that. Seeing this, Jiu Long was shocked and immediately raised his hand to call back his sword. The sword landed in his palm and was still trembling violently. It could be seen how powerful that blow was. He frowned and looked over. That was an extremely sharp long sword. Half golden, half greenish-black, neatly and perfectly blended together, and the glow was bright and heavy. This was, just as Jiu Long and Shi Yan were shocked, Qi Han and Lu Feng had already sensed the extremely familiar aura on that sword. The two of them quickly looked at each other and saw the excitement in each other's eyes. Jiu Long turned his head and looked in the direction where the sword came from. He shouted in a deep voice, "Who is it?" A clear and pleasant voice drifted over with the wind. Ninth Divine Envoy, if you want to kill my people, you should at least ask for my permission first, right? Jiu Long was stunned at first. Then he realized that this voice was very familiar. A name suddenly appeared in his mind. Shang Guan Yu. Just as he finished speaking, a woman in a red dress appeared in a flash. Her figure was slim and graceful, and her beauty was unparalleled. Her black hair flew in the wind, and the hem of her dress danced. There was a faint smile on her face, and her starry eyes were slightly curved like the moon, as if they were filled with starlight. Jiu Long's face darkened. "It's really you." Qi Han and Lu Feng could no longer suppress their emotions and shouted in unison. "Master!" Chu Luiwei came in front of the duo and sized them up. She only relaxed when she saw that their injuries weren't particularly serious. She smiled and said, "Don't worry. Fortunately, we're not too late." Jiu Long frowned and stared at the few people in front of him. "The two of them are your subordinates." Chu Luiwei turned around and tucked her hair behind her ear. She raised her finger and the Star Spectre sword returned to her hand. She smiled. "Yes." Chapter 23-23. Jiu Long looked at the woman in front of him in shock. He had only used 30% of his strength in that attack, but it wasn't something an ordinary cultivator could withstand. And yet, Chu Luiwei had blocked it so easily. He had heard this name a few times recently. After all, she had caused quite a commotion in the Illusion God Palace. But it wasn't until today that Jiu Long realized that her strength was indeed far beyond that of an ordinary god. "You came out of the Heaven Gate?" Jiu Long asked. Chu Luiwei smiled and nodded. "It's not the first time I've come out. Ninth Divine Envoy, why are you so surprised?" Jiu Long choked. He just felt that it was too ridiculous. Most of the cultivators in the Illusion God Palace would never step out of the Heaven Gate, let alone come to the world of Divine Ruins. And those who came from the world of Divine Ruins were proud to be able to enter the Illusion God Palace. They didn't want to leave. There were very few people like Chu Luiwei, who kept going in and out of the house. Her frequency was even higher than that of the Divine Envoys. Wasn't the seventh Divine Envoy in charge of guarding the Heaven Gate? Why did they let her come out again and again? More importantly, she didn't have a bloodline totem. Wasn't that even more ridiculous? Jiu Long stared at her vigilantly. "What are you doing here?" Even if she left the Illusion God Palace, there were many places she could go. Why did she choose the god-slaying tomb? It was related to the last zither score, so Jiu Long couldn't help but feel suspicious. Chu Luiwei blinked. "My two subordinates are here. What's so strange about me coming here?" "But the two Divine Envoys. Why did you suddenly leave the Illusion God Palace and come here and drive everyone else away? What are you doing?" Jiu Long's expression was cold. "That's not something you have the right to ask." Chu Luiwei said. "Oh. It seems that the two Divine Envoys don't want to reveal. Then forget it." As she spoke, she raised her head towards Qi Han and Lu Feng behind her. "Let's go." She was about to go to the tombs. "Stop." Jiu Long and Jiu Long never thought that Chu Luiwei would actually walk in without a second word. He didn't even put them in his eyes. Chu Luiwei stopped in his tracks and turned his head to ask, "What's wrong? Is there anything else?" Jiu Long gritted her teeth. "It seems like you've turned a deaf ear to what we've said before?" Chu Luiwei asked. "Words? What words?" Jiu Long felt stifled in his chest. Chi-Han explained. Master, they have already chased away all the cultivators here. If you hadn't come in time, I'm afraid we would have already. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. Oh, about that. She was wondering why she hadn't seen anyone along the way. It turned out that Jiulong and Shi Yan had chased them away. In that case, it was even more obvious what they wanted to do. Chu Luiyue tilted his head and looked at Jiulong and Shi Yan. That's really unfortunate. I've come this time because I have something important to do, so I won't be able to leave for the time being. I hope the two divine envoys will forgive me. Although she said so, her expression and tone were extremely natural. There wasn't the slightest hint of apology in them. Clearly, she wasn't asking for help. She was just informing them of her choice and decision. She was going to stay here. Shi Yan frowned and said coldly, Shangguanyu, you've done so many outrageous things in the Illusion God Palace. For Dumpling's sake, the divine envoys didn't pursue the matter. But that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. If you don't listen to our advice, don't blame us for being impolite. Chu Liuyue's lips curved into a faint smile. Forgive me for being blunt, but I don't think the divine envoys have done anything extra for me. Why do you look like you've given me a lot of things? Shi Yan felt even more annoyed. In the Illusion God Palace, the divine envoys were revered. No matter what they said or did, their subordinates would do as they were told. Very few would object, and even fewer would dare to talk back to them. But now, Chu Luiyue had done all of this, and she didn't seem afraid at all. Who gave her the confidence? Shangguanyu, are you sure you want to continue being so impudent? Jiulong raised his sword and pointed it at her. No matter how powerful your eminence is, she's still your eminence. If he used his full strength, Chu Luiyue wouldn't be able to retaliate at all. Chu Luiyue blinked and smiled in the face of the cold sword light. Divine envoys, if I'm not wrong, the two of you are also here for that last zither score, right? Since everyone has the same goal, why don't we work together and find it first? We can talk about the rest later. These words caused Jiulong and Shi Yan's expressions to change. This was something that the first divine messenger had specifically instructed the two of them. How did she know about it? Seeing the duo's reaction, Chu Luiyue also found it interesting. She glanced at the two of them, then slowly asked, You've come here to find the zither scores. The two of you have already come here to look for the zither score. Don't tell me that you still don't know. The two zither scores from before have already recognized me as their master? What did you say? Jiulong and Shi Yan both exclaimed in shock. Chu Luiyue shrugged. It seemed that they really didn't know. Since the first divine envoy gave you this task, why didn't he tell you about it? Not many people knew that she was the master of the zither scores, but Nan Jinshu was one of them. He had chosen to tell the first divine envoy the location of the last score, so there was no reason for him not to tell her. Besides, someone like the first divine envoy should know this like the back of his hand. Otherwise, how could he be qualified to be called the first divine envoy and be in charge of the entire Illusion God Palace? But the strange thing was, these two didn't know? Jiulong was about to attack. Chu Luiyue calmly raised her hand. Wait. Ninth divine envoy. I've already said that the two zither scores are with me, and they already belong to me. If you kill me now, you won't get a single one. Once she died, the two zither scores would be scattered and hidden away again, and they would never be found again. Unless there was something wrong with their heads, Jiulong and Shi Yan would never touch her. This was also why Chu Luiyue dared to be so frank. Since she couldn't hide it, she might as well be frank. You dare threaten us? Jiulong gritted her teeth. Chu Luiyue sighed helplessly. I've already made it so obvious, but you two only realized it now? She had always been a straightforward person. If she wanted to threaten someone, she would do it openly and openly. The first two zither scores were with her. If they had the ability, they would have to fight for it. She wasn't afraid of death, but she didn't know if the Illusion God Palace would be afraid of getting nothing in the end. Chapter 23-24. Jiulong and Shi Yan never expected that Chu Luiyue would do such a thing. She directly admitted that the two zither scores were with her and used them as leverage to threaten them so that they wouldn't dare to kill her. She was so direct that she didn't even give them any time to react. The most hateful thing was that after thinking about it carefully, they realized that Chu Luiyue wasn't so arrogant for no reason. After knowing this, even though they hated her to the core, they didn't dare to do anything to her. Since you're looking for the zither scores and I'm also looking for one, isn't it just right for us to work together? Chu Luiyue asked with a smile. Zhou Long was fuming with anger. What do you mean by just right? Shangguanyu, do you really think we're fools? The zither scores had already recognized her as the master, so even if they found the remaining one, it would most likely end up in her hands. In this aspect, she had an absolute natural advantage. Even if they worked together and found the zither scores, it would just be a wedding dress for her. Right now, they couldn't wait to guard against her, so why would they work together with her? Chu Luiyue looked regretful and spread her hands. It seems that the two of you aren't willing. Since that's the case, then, let's mind our own business and rely on our own abilities. How about it? This zither score belongs to whoever finds it first. Zhou Long and Shi Yan looked at each other. Of course, they didn't want to agree to Chu Luiyue's suggestion. She was the master of the zither scores, so she had an advantage over them. But if they didn't agree, looking at her posture, it seemed like she was going to continue to cause trouble. And they couldn't do anything to her. After a long while, Shi Yan gave Zhou Long a look, then looked at Chu Luiyue. Since you insist, it's not that we can't agree. But we also have a condition. Divine Envoy, please speak. Whether or not we can find the zither scores will depend on our own abilities. However, the person who brings the zither scores back to the Illusion God Palace will be the real winner. At that time, no matter what the result is, the other side can't continue to fight for it. Chu Luiyue's red lips curved slightly. I knew these two people wouldn't be easy to convince. So this was what they were planning. One had to know that there was a considerable distance between here and the Illusory God Palace. Who could predict what would happen in the middle? Even if she found it first, they could snatch it from her halfway and forcefully take it for themselves. In this way, he would be able to achieve his goal. Chu Luiyue was a god, while Qi Han and Lu Feng, who stood behind him, were both high gods. Zhou Long and Shi Yan, on the other hand, were both at a level higher than her eminence. Wasn't this clearly bullying? Once they made a move, Chu Luiyue's side would not be able to compete with them even if they tried their best. This was clearly a robbery. However, after Chu Luiyue thought about it seriously for a while, he nodded happily and agreed. Sure. Chu Luiyue's reply was too sudden. Even Zhou Long and the other two were momentarily stunned. However, one thing needs to be clear. Does returning to the Illusory God Palace refer to passing through the gate of heaven or something else? If you insist that it only counts after entering the Illusory God Palace, then wouldn't I have lost from the start? Chu Luiyue shrugged. Naturally, it counts after passing through the gate of heaven. Shi Yan added. Although he didn't know why Chu Luiyue agreed, this condition was clearly beneficial to them. It would be a waste not to use it. It would be best if the two of them could directly find the last zither score. If Chu Luiyue was one step ahead of them, they could just snatch it back. As long as they didn't harm her life, everything else was still under their control. Zhou Long's mood finally calmed down. Since we've discussed it then, rumble! A loud sound suddenly came from afar. Zhou Long and Shi Yan immediately turned to look. This sound came from the depths of the tomb. Someone had already entered. The two looked at each other. Zhou Long immediately realized something and looked at Chu Luiyue angrily. You secretly brought someone here? Chu Luiyue smiled, and her eyes curved into crescents. I didn't say that I came here alone. You. Zhou Long was so angry that her teeth were itching. She had said so much just to stall for time. Shi Yan frowned. Forget it. Now is not the time to argue with her. Let's go in and see what's going on. This commotion came so suddenly that it was definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could do. Something must have happened in the tombs of Her Eminence. Perhaps it has something to do with the last zither score. Zhou Long glared at Chu Luiyue. Shangguanyu, it's too early for you to be happy. The one who has the last laugh is the winner. Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered with the two of them. She turned to Qi Han and Lu Feng. Let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot, and her slender figure quickly disappeared from the spot. She went straight into the depths of the tomb. Qi Han and Lu Feng followed closely behind her. Fortunately, the two of them weren't seriously injured. Moreover, Chu Luiyue and Jiu Long had been fighting for a while, so they had rested enough and quickly followed. Jiu Long cursed under her breath and followed Shi Yan. Jiu Long and Shi Yan's cultivation level was higher than Chu Luiyue's after all. In just a few breaths' time, they had overtaken them. The two of them didn't stop and went straight in the direction of the voice. After about 15 minutes, they saw a figure in the distance. It was a young man. At this moment, his back was facing them. His clothes were whiter than snow, and he was tall and straight. He had one hand behind his back. The space in front of him was already beginning to distort and collapse, and it was constantly devouring the energy around him. Even though it was only a back view, that cold and noble aura was still not concealed in the slightest. Jiu Long frowned. Is this the person who came with Shangguanyu? Why does it look like something is wrong? He couldn't tell what was wrong, but there was an inexplicable sense of uneasiness in his heart. However, he quickly threw this feeling to the back of his mind. Who are you? How dare you team up with Shangguanyu and deceive the two of us? Jiu Long asked in a low voice. Hearing her voice, the man turned around. His handsome and devilish face seemed to be covered with a thin layer of frost. His phoenix eyes were deep and unparalleled. Jiu Long, Shi Yan, you're getting bolder. Digression. I want to eat barbecue. I'm going to be a fan. 6:00 p.m. Chapter 23-25. This question instantly caused Jiu Long and Shi Yan to be shocked on the spot. Emperor! The two of them were shocked. Their previous arrogance immediately disappeared and was replaced by deep respect. Why are you here? Jiu Long's face turned pale. What did he say to the emperor just now? No wonder he felt that something was wrong when he saw this figure. This figure, this aura. He actually didn't recognize it. Actually, Jiu Long couldn't be blamed. After so many years, the number of times he had seen the emperor could be counted on one hand. On one hand, the emperor didn't show up most of the time. On the other hand, with his and Shi Yan's seniority, they were usually quite far away from each other. They couldn't be said to be familiar with each other. Moreover, they didn't expect that the emperor would appear here. Rongxiu looked up slightly. Three figures could be vaguely seen from afar. They were Chu Luiyue and the other two. Their strength was not as strong as Jiu Long and Shi Yan. In addition, Qi Han and Lu Feng were only in the high god realm and were injured, so their speed was even more limited. As a result, the distance between the two sides was so large in a short period of time. However, this made it convenient for Rongxiu. This short period of time was enough for him to solve the problem of the two. Thinking of this, Rongxiu retracted his gaze and looked at the two again. Feeling that indifferent and cold gaze on them, Jiu Long and Shi Yan felt a sense of pressure and their bodies tensed up. Didn't you already guess why I am here? He said indifferently. The two of them were stunned. After a while, they suddenly came to their senses and were shocked. Wait, what does the emperor mean? Did he really come with Chu Luiyue? But Chu Luiyue's background, when did he have contact with the emperor? Furthermore, it would appear that the relationship between them was not ordinary at all. Otherwise, Chu Luiyue wouldn't have used such a tone when he mentioned the emperor. Shi Yan suddenly thought of something and gasped. Emperor, that Shangguanyu, is one of your men? He was guessing that Chu Luiyue was Rongxiu's subordinate and nothing else. However, Rongxiu was too lazy to correct him. He only raised his eyebrows slightly. His people. There was nothing wrong with that. Ben was his. His reaction in the eyes of the other two was obviously a tacit agreement. For a moment, the two of them did not know how to react. Why didn't Chu Luiyue mention such an important matter before? If she had revealed even the slightest bit, she definitely wouldn't have received that kind of treatment in the illusory god palace. Jiu Long and Shi Yan couldn't figure it out. The only thing they were clear on was that they had offended Chu Luiyue earlier, and this undoubtedly meant that they had offended the Celestial Emperor as well. Celestial Emperor, we have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai, which is why we offended you. Please forgive us. Jiu Long came back to his senses and quickly begged for mercy. Other than begging for mercy, he couldn't think of anything else he could do now. Previously, he had rushed over excitedly, intending to find the last zither score before Chu Luiyue. Even if he couldn't find it, it wasn't bad to get rid of the person who conspired with her first. Who knew that he would bump into this person? Wasn't this courting death? Shi Yan saw the situation and immediately followed suit, his heart filled with uneasiness. Although they had only seen the Celestial Emperor a few times, they were very clear about the Celestial Emperor's temperament. It was definitely not to be provoked. The mistake that they had made today was enough for them to suffer a lot. Rong Xiu didn't say anything. The surroundings fell into a dead silence, as if even the air had frozen at this moment. The two of them held their breaths, as if their hearts were about to jump out of their throats. Finally, Rong Xiu spoke. Go to the illusory god Sea and receive your punishment. Without Ai's permission, you are not allowed to leave. Hearing this, Jiu Long and Shi Yan were stunned. Celestial Emperor means now? Rong Xiu's eyes moved slightly, and his thin scarlet lips raised into an extremely cold arc. If you can continue to stay here, it will be considered as your ability. The two of them trembled at the same time. This meant that if they didn't leave immediately, the Celestial Emperor would personally take action. Even if the two of them had the guts, they wouldn't dare to take such a risk. Wasn't this taking the initiative to throw themselves into a knife's mouth? But, Celestial Emperor, it's not that the two of us deliberately disobeyed your orders, but this time, we are here on the orders of the first divine envoy to find the last zither score. If we can't complete the mission, I'm afraid that when we return, we won't be able to explain it to the first divine envoy. Jiu Long braced himself and spoke with difficulty. If they had any other choice, they wouldn't choose to go against the Celestial Emperor. But in this situation, they really had no choice. After all, the divine envoys were from the illusory god palace. Since the first divine envoy had ordered them, they didn't dare to disobey. Although the Celestial Emperor had a noble status, under most circumstances, he wouldn't interfere in the matters of the illusory god palace. And the zither score was also an item of the illusory god palace. Logically speaking, this matter shouldn't have much to do with the Celestial Emperor. Why would he come here personally? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. What? Ai's orders can't even compare to the words of the first divine envoy. We don't dare. Jiu Long and Shi Yan's souls almost flew out of their bodies as they hurriedly denied. Not to mention them, even the master of the illusory god palace had to respectfully greet the Celestial Emperor when he saw him. How could they dare to say that? After weighing the pros and cons, the two of them struggled for a while before finally nodding with difficulty. We obey the Celestial Emperor's orders. But the last zither score. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. The zither score came from the illusory god palace, so it should return in the end. Hearing this, Jiu Long and Shi Yan only thought that he agreed to return the last zither score to the illusory god palace after finding it. No matter what, they would be able to answer to the first divine envoy when they returned. Then, the two of us will take our leave. After saying that, seeing that Rong Xiu's expression was normal, the two of them bowed respectfully and then hurriedly turned and left. Their speed was even faster than when they came. They were afraid that if they were a step late, they would lose their lives here. After a while, the two figures quickly disappeared into the distance. At this moment, Chu Luiyue and the other two finally arrived. Seeing that only Rong Xiu was here, Chu Luiyue was stunned. Where are the two divine envoys? Chapter 23-26. Rong Xiu turned around. Who? Chu Luiyue said, the 9th and 10th divine messengers. The two of them just came here. Didn't you see them? Rong Xiu shook his head. I've been here the whole time. I didn't see anyone coming. Chu Luiyue frowned. How could she not see them? Although the two divine messengers had put some distance between her and Seven Chill Due Wind, she was sure that they were coming this way. She looked left and right. The surroundings were barren and desolate. There were no signs of anyone coming here. Suddenly, she focused her gaze and looked at the collapsing void not far behind Rong Xiu. This is... Rong Xiu followed her gaze and explained. The loud noise just now came from here. The last time we came here, something similar happened, but it was different. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. She had noticed this as well. The last time, she and Rong Xiu fell into a space that suddenly collapsed, and they brought the rocks back. This time, The energy and pressure here were much stronger than in the tombs of the high gods. Although the void was constantly swallowing energy, twisting and collapsing, it was not completely overturned yet. From this, one could see how powerful the power of space here was. At a glance, a transparent vortex had formed in the void. It kept spinning and expanding. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth kept surging into it, gradually turning it into a black hole. It could not be seen or touched. Only the vast pressure was getting heavier and heavier, indicating the danger within. It was still rising. A faintly discernible summoning force came from the vortex. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly and walked forward. Master. Chi Han and Lu Feng called out worriedly. Chu Luiyue raised her hand. Don't worry. I know what to do. With that, she continued to walk forward. At this moment, a piece of gravel the size of a palm suddenly rolled over from the side. It only stopped when it touched the tip of her foot. Chu Luiyue looked down. Obviously, this stone came from one of the tombstones. And it was the tomb of the high god. She bent down and picked up the stone. Suddenly, she heard a faint buzzing sound in front of her that could not be ignored. Buzz. She looked up in surprise, only to see that the vortex not far in front of her had suddenly stopped spinning. But this situation only lasted for a moment. The next moment, everything returned to normal. It didn't seem any different from before. However, Chu Luiyue's eyes widened in shock. Because there seemed to be an invisible connection between her and the vortex. This feeling was very strange. From this moment on, she could vaguely feel the changes in energy of the vortex. She was stunned for a moment, then suddenly, she looked at the stone in her hand. It was just a shattered, weathered, and ordinary-looking rock. There were traces of erosion on it. If it was on the ground, no one would take a second look at it. However, this was a tombstone that belonged to a high god. At this moment, the void to her right twisted and collapsed, then quickly formed a vortex. Another stone rolled to her feet. Chu Luiyue sucked in a breath of cold air. An absurd and daring idea surfaced in her mind. It can't be, she muttered softly. Then, she bent down and picked up the second stone. Almost at the same time, the second vortex stopped spinning. Chu Luiyue's hands slowly clenched. Then, the vortex spun again, and it established that invisible connection with Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was shocked. As expected. The stones here were similar to the ones she had obtained in the high god's tombstones, but in fact, they were very different. Each of them actually controlled a space. It might be an exaggeration to say that they controlled it, but it was basically the same. The surrounding energy was constantly surging toward the two vortexes, and the two stones in Chu Luiyue's hands seemed to be faintly strengthening. Although it was subtle, it could not be mistaken. Clang! Suddenly, the sound of a zither came from Chu Luiyue's dantian. The sound of the zither was bleak and cold, and it spread far and wide in this vast wilderness. Chu Luiyue frowned subconsciously. She did not do anything just now, so why did the sound of the zither suddenly appear? Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from the wind. The void over there is also starting to collapse. And there. Chu Luiyue followed his gaze. Not far behind them, 3 more vortexes quickly appeared. The vast space seemed to be divided into countless small areas, and they all started to collapse. In just a few minutes, Chu Luiyue and the others were already surrounded by several void vortexes. A few stones rolled over and stopped at Chu Luiyue's feet. Her heart raced, and the blood in her body seemed to be boiling. Her guess seemed to be correct. These stones, these tombstones of her eminence, these heroic souls that had been buried for tens of thousands of years, seemed to be awakening. Her eminence was naturally different from a high god. A high god's combat strength was in the god domain, but her eminence had completely divided this world and controlled the endless power of space. Bas, bas, bas. Void vortexes appeared around them one after another. More and more stones came to Chu Luiyue's side, as if they were responding to her summons. Clang, clang. Chu Luiyue's glabella was boiling hot. Chapter 23-27. She touched the area between her eyebrows. It was as if there was a burning flame burning there. Her heart was beating rapidly, and the blood in her body was surging. This was her totem? Chu Luiyue had known about the existence of this thing for a long time, but it had only appeared a few times when she was in a life-or-death situation. Hence, she had not been able to pay much attention to it. But now, this totem had suddenly appeared again. It was so clear. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth started to gather towards her quickly. Her aura also started to rise rapidly. Buzz buzz. Chu Luiyue looked up. Above the heavens, the void was continuously distorting and collapsing. Vortexes were constantly appearing. Large pieces of rocks had already piled up beside her feet. An unparalleled amount of energy exploded, creating an extremely terrifying pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. Beside her, Lu Feng clutched her chest and sat down. She coughed a few times and wiped away the blood at the corner of her mouth. Then, she placed her hands on her knees and started to channel the surrounding energy into her body. Under such a powerful pressure, the best way to deal with it was to cultivate. Seeing this, Qi Han's expression became serious. He also placed his sword in front of him and started to cultivate. At this moment, endless energy was surging towards them from all directions. Most of it entered the collapsed void, which indirectly strengthened the power of the rocks beside Chu Luiyue's feet. The remaining small portion dissipated and was swallowed by Lu Feng and Qi Han. Although the energy that the two of them occupied was only a small portion compared to the energy that was surging into the void, it was definitely an extremely vast amount for exalted God. A faint blue glow overflowed from Lu Feng's body and quickly enveloped him. This was his godly territory. After the violent energy entered this godly territory, it was refined and became even purer. Without a doubt, this greatly increased Lu Feng's cultivation speed. Qi Han, who was beside her, made the same choice almost at the same time. A faint silver glow silently spread out and enveloped Qi Han's body. Rong Xiu's gaze turned slightly and paused on the two of them for a moment. His eyes were deep, yet calm and indifferent. In the next moment, he looked away. In fact, if there were other cultivators present, they would definitely be shocked to see Lu Feng and Qi Han's situation. After all, the two of them were only high gods. Logically speaking, their god realm should not be able to resist the terrifying might of the venerable god around them. It was even to the extent that the deity domain could not be used under such circumstances. However, from the beginning to the end, the movements of these two people were extremely smooth and natural, as if they were not hindered in the slightest. If Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look, she might have sensed that something was wrong. However, all her energy was focused on the collapsing void and the gathering stones. How could she care about anything else? One after another. As more and more stones approached her, the invisible connection between her and the void vortexes around her became closer and closer. At the same time, a sense of desolation and sorrow welled up in his heart. Chu Luiyue was never a sentimental person. However, as she stood here, as time slowly passed and everything around her kept changing, her state of mind seemed to be moving along uncontrollably. A wind blew, carrying the coarse gravel of the desolate wilderness. When it brushed past her face, it brought a slight stinging pain. The smell of blood in the air seemed to have thickened. The solemn and bleak sound of the zither rang out from her body and spread far and wide. There seemed to be an image that appeared in her mind, but it was not very clear. Chu Luiyue raised her hand almost instinctively. Her eyes focused and seemed to have sunk into nothingness. At this moment, there seemed to be countless stars in the depths of her obsidian-like eyes. Then, her slender and white fingertips gently plucked. Clang! There were no strings under her hands, so she used the countless intersecting spaces as support to play the zither. Clang clang! Shattered tombstones stood in great numbers on the wilderness. There seemed to be a zither sound in the depths that resonated with her from afar. The palace of the illusory god. Jiulong and Shi Yan returned as fast as they could. After stepping into the illusory god palace, they did not care about anything else and hurried to the residence of the first divine envoy. Just as they arrived outside the courtyard and stood still, the door of the courtyard opened. Seeing this scene, Jiulong and Shi Yan looked at each other and saw the worry and nervousness in each other's eyes. The first divine envoy obviously knew something. This made them timid and for a moment, they did not dare to take a step forward. Come in and talk. A low and indifferent voice came from inside. The two did not dare to refuse and walked in nervously. Just like last time, they stopped when they were 5 steps away from the door. After respectfully cupping their fists, Jiulong spoke after some deliberation. First divine envoy, this time, The two of us did not do well and did not succeed in bringing back the zither score. Please punish us. Reason. The voice was calm and collected, without the slightest hint of surprise. This. Zhou Long wiped the sweat from her forehead. However, Shi Yan could not help but explain. First Divine Envoy, this time we failed to return because the Emperor also went to the god-slaying tomb. Also, Shanghai Yu went with him. Maybe because Shanghai Yu was the owner of the first two zither scores, the Emperor intended to let her do it. Although we don't know why the Emperor suddenly intervened, we did not dare to disobey the Emperor's order, so we came back. However, the Emperor promised to send the zither score to the illusory god palace after this matter is over. Zhou Long gritted her teeth and added. In addition, the two of us have been ordered to the illusory god sea to receive punishment because we offended the Emperor unintentionally. Without the Emperor's order, we are not allowed to go out. In other words, after explaining to the first Divine Envoy, the two of them had to go to the illusory god sea. After the two of them finished speaking, the room was silent for a long time. This strange silence caused the two of them to be somewhat at a loss. Just now they did not say anything wrong, did they? No matter what, they had explained the matter clearly. If one thought about it, one would understand that this matter was not their fault. Not to mention them, even the first Divine Envoy did not dare to disobey the Emperor's order. Moreover, the Emperor had already punished them. What else could be considered enough? Zhou Long and Shi Yan waited for a long time. First Divine Envoy? Finally they got a response. I already know about this matter. You can leave now. You should receive your punishment, but this matter cannot be spread. The two of them were stunned. You mean, the Emperor went to the god-slaying tomb? The voice paused. Everything and everyone related to the zither score must be kept secret. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.